Okay, so now that we're actually all here, we probably should, reintroduce ourselves.
Hiya, I'm Mary. I write fan fiction and I read fan fiction. And honestly, that's the entirety of what I do with my life. It's mostly Star Wars stuff right now. Because Cuphead fan fiction, there's not a whole lot of good. Most of it's pretty bad, actually. Finding good Cuphead fan fiction is hard. A lot of good Star Wars fan fiction, though. Oh, that's sweet ink. And that's what I live for. And I was looking for a Tangled fan fiction that I remember reading that was so good, but I can't find it. So
All right, and I'm DJ. I write speculative fiction and erotica. Um, I like weird shit. I am a very big booster of Chuck Tingle and the general idea of, work should prove love, which is to say, it should be, socially constructive. I guess that's how I think of it. But
yeah.
it's just also just fun.
Hi, I'm Soul. This is the Curmudgeonly Writers Podcast, episode 2. I write some kind of fucked up shit.
Valid.
I like to think we all have our moments.
I think we all have our moments.
I'm going easy on you this time. I could have, dropped my worst one for this exercise. I'm like, yeah, they don't need to hear that. I mean, they could, but I don't want to, make people cry, you know? I mean, I do, but I don't know who's watching,
this might not be a good exercise to just come in hot with Glacey's one.
Glacé's a little too much, yeah, maybe.
Because that's the first page where you're like, what the fuck did this come from?
I also don't think I have enough openings. So I have 2 that are mine and 2 that aren't.
You know
That's
what?
fine.
If we need more runtime, because you don't have enough, I'll read the opening of Glacé's. That's...
Okay.
trying to find I was trying to find a particular fanfiction that I read a long time ago that I thought was amazing and I can't find it and I can't remember its name. So that's where my third is. It's all Star Wars. I'm so sorry. I hope that y'all like Star Wars.
I mean, I feel like everyone has at least some piece of the franchise that they like, and if you're not, I do not understand.
Unless you're Saul.
I like the one Star Wars movie that I'm not really allowed to like, so...
Well, no, you're allowed to like whatever you like. I fully admit that the prequels are bad, but I also fully admit that Hayden Christensen's very pretty, and also that I really love Anakin and Obi-Wan both.
So
the prequels are bad. I love them anyway.
I'm just gonna, interject to explain what we're doing for this episode. We are going to be talking about how to introduce a story. So I thought the best way to do that was to force my co-hosts, because I wanted to do this truly, to find, pieces of writing. So some of them will be our writing, some will be, other people's writing, and we're just going to read the first page. And we're not going to say, who the author is, what the title of the story is, anything. We're just going to read the first page. We're going to discuss it. We're going to discuss what kind of story it might be leading to. And then we'll talk about who wrote it and what it's called and what it actually is about. Some of them, obviously, each of us will recognize because, we know each other's writing decently well. But we'll pretend that we don't know. It'll be like when you open a gift on Christmas and you know what it is, but you have to pretend that you don't know what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or maybe it'll be like, where's Waldo? And you have to take a second to find Waldo again.
Yeah, maybe. I was thinking of the, an avocado, thanks, Vine, when I said this, but...
I mean, if you've seen the avocado that many times before, it is probably not still a good avocado.
No, probably not. They don't last very long. I like avocado, but you leave it in the fridge for, 1 day too long and it's bad, so...
Gosh, now that you guys are talking about avocado, I need to make myself some avocado toast. Let's make myself
Californian avocado.
We really shouldn't talk about avocado too much.
Okay, that's my arm.
Today, so I'm getting myself an avocado bagel. I'm gonna make one.
We should
A
clip
bagel, you
this.
said?
Okay, but I can make an avocado bagel while we talk about writing.
We're gonna clip out this scene and send this alone to Jack. Him listening to us talk about avocado. That'd be really funny.
That would be so funny, but I
He
don't.
gets for not showing up.
No. That was mean of me. I shouldn't say that.
I don't think he'd appreciate it. I don't think he likes avocado.
You know he
very much.
doesn't, that's why. Or mango. I keep track. Don't ask why I keep
I do
track.
not keep track of these things.
The entire state of California.
Yeah,
I'm gonna fight her because I really like living here.
I mean, it definitely has its plus sides. I still think about that one time that we had like a fresh picked one from a tree in Paso Robles. Ugh, so good.
Avocado
So
talk is
good.
definitely writing talk, guys.
Oh,
Okay,
right.
we're a writing podcast.
But we had an actual topic, I think.
Yeah, we were gonna talk about introductions, which we are obviously fantastic at.
Okay, so discussion
we're
point.
introducing ourselves very in medias res.
Yeah, no, we're discussion point 1 isn't us reading it, but it's like we'll just kind of go between each other like we did last time. But it is how we like to open stories, like how we write opening stories, but also like what kind of openings we like to read for stories. So I'll let you two go first, and I'll hang back, and then I'll go afterwards.
Okay, so DJ, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Sure. I'll go first.
Okay.
So, I had this whole speech in my planned out. No, I tend to go for a mix of stories with like a very intricately planned, epic sounding beginning at the beginning, and stories that are just a relief that begins somewhere kind of in medias res, in a very fun way, like just throw you, deep end first into something weird is happening, and then you got to backtrace and understand what the fuck's going on. And I like to think I write a mix of those two, those two versions myself. But like the more general principle, I guess, if there's something to unify those two things, is that I want a beginning to give me a bunch of clues, not too loudly necessarily, about, foreshadow, what kind of stuff I can expect to see in the coming pages, what, a nod to the genre that I'm in, to what's on the author's mind for his readers, for their readers to discover in that story. Like almost like functioning as a blurb for the wider story, but being, the text of the story.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you. I tend to like slower work in general, so I also really like things that are like a little blurb of the story. I mean, like, yeah, I kind of agree with you, honestly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like some authors just really have a way with this that I, would only hope to emulate, like the way that the things are just tied up with a bow.
Yeah. My bad. Oop. So you like introductions that are like you like intrigue introduction, right?
Yes, and oftentimes there's like either action or like a setup for action that comes along relatively quickly. I guess that's tends to be my preference.
So you would like, say, a movie that opens up with a fight scene and that introduces you to your superhero protagonist who's like punching the bad guy, and then that's like the first thing you see. Like Into the Spider-Verse is like a really good like action intro. where like you're like really, really quickly met up with Peter
Okay,
Parker.
yeah.
Immediately
Yes.
dies off.
God,
That's
did you
true.
see the new one? Oh my god, it's
I did
incredible.
not see
I
the
have
new one
not.
yet.
I
We
have
won't
not.
spoil
Don't
anything,
it.
but it's amazing.
But I'm very excited.
I've only heard good things about it, so
You will
it's on my list
love it.
that I need to watch. My brother hasn't seen the first Into the Spider-Verse, so I don't have somebody to go see it in theaters with. So
You'll be fine. You can watch it without, like, it has its own story, so.
yeah, but
Maybe, like, read a summary with him before, but
I want to make him watch the first one, but I'd also kind of like to drag one of my friends over to watch it with me because I want to see it.
give me a plane
Actually,
ticket. I'm
Okay,
kidding.
so just slightly like tangential. So you guys know how I work at Disneyland.
Yes.
So we sell these things called magic bands,
Yes.
and before the release of Across the Spider-Verse, I was like looking at what magic bands we have. We have an Across the Spider-Verse one, and my brain is just looking at this being like, we don't own that. Why are we allowed to sell that? Why do we have an
Maybe.
Across the Spider-Verse Disney Parks ticket thing? That's not a Disney movie.
I think it's because everyone wants to work with Disney except Florida.
I think that
Except Florida.
Thank you.
I heard that they apparently use one of the verses that that is in Across the Spider-Verse is the Disney MCU.
Oh, wait. That's right. Disney is
So-
already partners with the MCU. They're on the
And yes,
Disney
you're
Plus
right,
app.
it is.
owns the MCU. They just don't own Into the Spider-Verse because superhero rights are complicated. So apparently,
So
since
complicated.
one of the universes is the MCU, Disney's allowed to sell Spider-Verse merchandise, which means we have some pretty awesome looking pins, I'm totally honest. I might buy that pin set. I'm not getting the Magic Band. I'm not buying any of the limited edition Magic Bands, but I am getting the pin. For sure. They're very cool looking.
Intellectual
I
property
love
law.
Into the Spider-Verse art. Anyways, we were talking about introductions, and I was like, Into the Spider-Verse is a good example of the kind of introduction you just described, right? If I'm
Yeah,
understanding what you're
if-
saying.
I was gonna say, and I think that sounds like pretty much the same kind of thing, but I was gonna say it occurred to me recently that in my head when I was writing the intro to a new story, and a thing happened in my head that like it sort of clicked with me. Like I'm writing this as though I'm writing the pre-title action sequence of a movie or of a an episode of a TV show, and there's gonna be like a little
Full
something
opening
shocking
credits.
is going to happen, and then boom, title card. It's almost as if the title of the story belongs 3 pages in.
Nice.
And I was like,
kind of the
maybe
story
that's
I
the
like
thing I
hearing.
like.
If I can imagine a title card, I'm like, ooh, Shivers introduction.
Shivers.
Shivers and Timber.
Yes.
But I like in introductions is probably actually a lot slower than you. 'Cause-
Yeah, so tell us about that.
Okay, so I like the first thing that I learn about in a story to be a focal character. I like the first thing that we see to be our characters. So like an introduction that is like, say, the old wizened wizard is looking out on a balcony and speculating on something. Gosh, I can't think of another example of this, so I'm so sorry to bring this up because it's not a story I like anymore. But the only example I can think of right now off the top of my head is Harry Potter,
I mean,
where our first thing that we're introduced to is Dumbledore and McGonagall giving the child over to the Dursleys. And that's the kind of intro I like to see, is something that's quiet, almost mysterious.
yes.
Something that introduces us to a character or a concept in a subtle kind of way. I'm trying to think of other examples because, like, I seek these things out. But then, like, of course, I also loved your intrigue entries. Like,
Well, it's intrigue. It seems like, in either case that you're achieving the goal of intrigue, but this one is maybe a bit slower in part because it's character driven.
Yeah, I really like character-driven stories in general.
Yeah.
I like to focus on the relationship between two people. Like, in my own fan fiction that I will finish. I will actually write it. The thing that's stopping me right now is that my roleplay partner for the Cuphead fan fiction has been offline for several months, and I can't conspire with her on anything. So, see that how that. But the main focus of the story is a character dynamic, even as the two characters are far away from each other. And I do really, really like stories that focus on character dynamics like that. And so that's what I read and that's what I write. I think the only exception I can really think of is my love of the Percy Jackson the Olympian series. And even then, I like the Kane Chronicles better than Percy Jackson and the Olympians. And the Kane Chronicles is the one that focuses on the brother-sister relationship between Carter and Sadie. So
That makes a lot of sense. I tend to find that like good writing should be character driven in the broader sense, and I guess maybe that like where we differ is just in like the title, sort of the title card, as it were. That area I tend to like be comfortable with it being a bit more action driven.
yeah, and you're like looking at like action driven stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's not always action stories, but like I don't know. In my examples, I think maybe it'll be clear what I mean.
Yeah. So what about you, Soul?
Yeah, get in on this.
You know, I feel like my answer is going to be like the most obvious thing. I like to describe myself as having like stabby stab boom brain when it comes to writing. Uh, Part of that is that I just have. I'm sorry, you can probably hear cat in the background sometimes. I have ADHD, right? So like there's that aspect of it. So I have a very hard time paying attention to stories that progress at like a fucking snail's pace. Like I'll do it. I will do my darndest, but it's very difficult for me if the story isn't moving forward for me to like sit there and slog through it. And stories that have like slow openings, like I have to read a bit, then I have to put it down, and then I have to go back and read it later. I can't just like sit there and read it. It like puts me to sleep. So the kind of things I write are like some of the examples I'll read. Like I think everything I've written has a very like fast and hard intro. Like you walk in on a fight scene, or in the case of Glacé, it's not a fight scene, but it's like very difficult, and I just kind of like throw you in it. And I do this thing with readers where I don't really write exposition because I think it's boring, and I don't really write internal like dialogue because I also think it's boring. So everything I'm trying to tell you, I just imply through like the characters' actions and dialogue, and then I just kind of throw you into what's happening, and then I write it very objectively, but also kind of from their point of view. So like their worldview is relevant in how everything is paced and how everything happens and how I kind of write the actual prose, but I don't go into their actual thoughts on things, and you're just kind of like seeing things as they are, kind of influenced by the main character's eyes.
Yeah, it's like third person cinematic, which is to say third person limited, and it's not really any particular person. It's you're supposed to infer all that stuff.
But it
So
kind
what
of
I'm getting
is.
Saul thinks that my writing is boring.
I don't. I like your writing. Shush. I read slow stuff too. It's not that I don't. It's just I have a hard time with it. And it's not because the
Yeah.
writing quality is bad. It's because how my brain works. I still read it though,
I just-
so like.
Saul thinks
I
my
think
writing is
Saul's stuff
boring.
is
That's
like-
all I'm getting here.
Sorry, DJ?
Solid like stab boom trauma.
Yeah, stab, boom, trauma. I open with like very dark, traumatic stuff, and then I unpack it throughout the story. So like with Raylan, I open with like just this gritty, like awful fight scene, and everything in there is super important, even if you don't like think it is immediately. And then throughout the story, I unpack all of that, and then the ending comes back around to kind of the opening in a way. But I don't tell you that in the story. I just kind of expect you to figure it out.
Nice.
Which- Which some people hate, by the way. Like, I'm not saying that I'm, like, better than anyone.
I think that your way of introducing things with, like, introducing the premise really strong and then going back and unpacking it, I think that sounds like a really fun way to, like, put through your ideas.
That stuff is hard to do.
Yeah.
But it automatically, like, passes all the rules of show and tell, which means it tends to be very strong. Like, when your stuff works, it works incredibly well.
Were you saying that about me particularly, or the idea?
No, you. I'm saying you're writing it when it's good, it's great.
Thank you. I'll try not to write badly.
Not to say that you write badly, but well, you know, you're like all of us. We write and then we iterate.
Of course, yeah. As for what I read literally anything. So I'll read things that are very slow stories. I'll read things that are autobiographical. I'll read things that are like the kind of stuff I like to write. I do like introductions that, at the very least, introduce me to what I can expect from the story, which doesn't mean they have to be like medias res, like what I like to do, but they can just be like, slower, as long as they give me enough information to get invested and know what to expect.
Mm.
I think that that's kind of important for any intro, is that it tells you what the story's gonna be.
Yes. And I've read some that do not do that.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what we're all saying at the end of the day, right? That, like, because the kind of intros we like are also informed by the kind of stories we like. I like slow burn character drama driven stories that unpack a lot of mental health stuff. Which means that I like slow burn intros that introduce me to my characters and what their problems are.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for less is more, and like, there's still a lot going on in those moments. From the ones I read, like, it's not there isn't a lot of stuff going on. Just it's the subtext.
Is when we are first introduced to a character who's sitting there in conflict over something they've done and reminiscing, which I might be talking about a very specific fanfiction author who I think is the best, and I love everything she does. She has a tendency to, like, open up her story with a character kind of reminiscing or kind of having regrets on something that they did earlier, and it introduces you to the premise through them being, like, upset about it, and I'm like, peak writing. This is exactly what I want from an ex-fic.
Also, you can, say who it is if you want, Mary. You can give links and stuff, and I'll shut it out.
Dranistel? I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyways, their writing is all so good. This, by the way, is how you get me to read explicit work. Just for the record, I'm gonna shoot a link to their archive of our own.
Yeah, do it. So I will shout them out in this, and I'll post it in the description.
If you like Star Wars fanfiction, if you like angst, if you really like the Obi-Wan Anakin dynamic, highly recommend.
Actually, I take it this is Flash.
Where did you post it?
Chat. Oh, I posted in chat hole. Oop. Let me delete that and then post that into our proper theme.
Sure. Post it in general, and I'll repost it into
there we go. I posted it in general. There we go. That's where I meant to post it. I just accidentally posted it to the other writing group.
Copy link. For our people watching us right now, I will quickly drop a link to this.
I am unabashedly a fan of this person.
All right, so we were somewhere in the middle of your answer, Saul.
Sorry, 1 second. I need to, okay, Stranestle. Okay.
They're writing so good.
I have to type it out manually because I can't copy paste links. Bullshit, but 1 sec. Estelle. On AO3. Okay.
It's Star Wars fanfiction. They write
Yeah.
Star Wars: The Clone Wars fan fiction.
But it's there. I know we have at least one viewer right now, so it's there. If you want to like look them up, totally go for it. So yeah, no, that was pretty much it for me. I do very dramatic and like dark stuff myself. Usually explicit, like at the very least with violence. And what I read is really up in the air because I consume a lot of different types of things. So my preferences are very like varied, but I like stories that kind of have something to say, and the intros kind of have to lend me to believe that, if that makes any sense.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me.
I picked some pretty baller examples too, so I'm kind of stoked to get into it.
Yeah, I want to get into it as well.
So,
So are
which
we
one of
gonna do the
you
original
has
side?
something up and wants to go first?
I have
Okay,
things.
so I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Are we going to like take turns reading like a single excerpt at a time?
Yes. Yeah. We'll kind of round robin it, if you will. That way, it's not one
Sounds good
person
enough.
reading for like a half an hour. We'll take breaks. So like you'll read one, then we'll
So
go to DJ,
I
then I'll read
have
one, something
all
like
of
that.
my first pages put into a single document. That's how
Do
I
you-
know that they're each exactly one page.
Do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
Okay, so
Alright.
the only rule
Okay.
is don't tell us what it is or who wrote it, even if it's yours. Just read it. We'll discuss it, and then we'll discuss afterwards the bigger context of it.
Okay,
Okay, go.
January 7th, 1931, Inkwell Isles. The sound of slot machines filled the air as patrons talked and laughed, smoking cigars and sipping on drinks that would get them tossed in the slammer. The manager of the establishment leaned against the poker table, a wide and distinctly wicked grin on his face as he watched the porcelain child in the center of the room face consequences for his actions from the inky figure of the devil towering over him. Cuphead stood before the devil, feeling a surge of regret welling up in his chest. The devil's booming laughter rang out through the smoky air, his voice filled with a malicious glee. You think you can out-con the con man, boy? I invented the game. Every hustle, swindle, and racket you ever pulled was borrowed from me. And when you borrow something, you need to pay it back with interest. So I will be taking a little collateral while we hammer out your payment plan. His younger twin, slightly taller, but just as bright and twice as sweet as he was himself, was frozen in the devil's grasp. He couldn't squirm in the claws of the king of hell. Say goodbye now, the devil chimed, poking the button on the elevator with his tail, so casually it was an insult. Goodbye. And that small squeak of parting word was the last thing Cuphead heard from Mugman. His heart felt like a brick. Moments ago, he was so confident, and yet it seemed like the entire world was crushed right before his eyes. What would he tell Elder Kettle? Please give an applause. I only stuttered like 3 times.
I mean,
well.
honestly, you did a really good job reading that. I'm terrible at reading out loud, so you know it's gonna be great
So
for you to
am
hear me
I
stumble
was
over everything.
practicing for the past half hour, okay? I mean, the past half hour before we started recording. I had to practice.
I did
See,
not
I could believe
practice. I'm gonna die like a very dumb man.
I warmed up a little. We'll see. So I wanted to say, I could believe that this is as a broader story that this is slow burn, but it also there's plenty going on here. You know, like these are moments where it's appropriate for time to slow down, and it's a really gripping moment.
I'm gonna pretend
It
that I
is,
have
isn't it?
no idea what this is from. It is
Yeah,
a
same
very
also.
it's a very good introduction because it kind of like you immediately have like a sense of atmosphere and character and your protagonist and what the plot is going to kind of be focusing around in terms of the struggle that the protagonist is going through. So like for me that would be a solid intro because I would read that and be like, okay, I want to know what happens next. So like that's the job well done. It definitely reads like it could be a more intense story, but then it goes more slow burn. But because you have like compelling characters, I don't think. Oh, sorry. Because the author has compelling characters, I don't think you're gonna like. They're not gonna like lose readers from slowing down a little bit from that intro.
A comment I have on it, because I've read this intro so many times, it has turned my brain into putty for reasons. Anyways, because I've read this enough times, something that I appreciate about it is that you can kind of get a sense of the camera angle. Like, the first thing you get is like a sweep of the room, and like the first thing that's noted is is neither the devil or Cuphead.
Yes, it's familiar.
He's the first person that you like notice in the scene, even though he's not the protagonist. He's gonna be important later, probably, but like you kind of get a sense of the camera angle. Like, this is something that's being viewed on a TV screen as an atmosphere setting thing. And that's something I kind of appreciate about it.
That is really cool.
So do you want to reveal the author and the name?
Oh, the suspense is killing me.
So the author of this is me, Mary, mystery muffin artist on Archive of Our Own, and the name of the story is Seven Sins in 14 Days, and it is set about I think it was 5 years. I think it was 5 years after this. Yeah, it's set in 1936, so it's 5 years after this, almost 6. Where basically the objective is like it's a play on Cuphead is having to do these favors to the devil to get his brother back. It's basically a play on a twisting of how the game goes. Instead of trying to save his soul, he's specifically only trying to save his brother's soul, his brother who did not make any deals, because he doesn't in the game. And it is a slow burn, kind of angsty fic about facing the consequences of your action and what consequences are constitute as too much. So yeah.
I had no idea that you wrote this, and I've not read anything else from this. No, I mean, I've already told you, in private, I think it's a great intro.
You have. I think that you very specifically mentioned me during one of our writing things that you were like, speaking of good intros, where the frick is Mary?
I think I tagged you in it. I pulled you into the discussion. Yeah, I read almost everything in the server. I try to, at least.
I haven't read your intro. I've read other parts.
In that post intro, you specifically tagged me, and you were like, but speaking of good intros, though. So I'm pretty proud of that one. That's part of why I'm proud of it, actually.
Yeah, I think this is my first time hearing the intro itself, and it definitely works. It's, you could see coming all the stuff that does come later, in a general sort of way.
And you can also get an impression of the general vibe of the story.
Yes, the Roaring Twenties, not the Prohibition vibe, right? The Prohibition kind of vibe.
Oh yeah, the story is actually set after Prohibition, but in the aftermath of it, which is very fun as a setting. 1930s is a good setting. Great Depression, yeah. Prohibition, all of the aftermath of Prohibition is a lot of fun to write.
Yes, and not coincidentally, that same kind of gritty vibe that you get from old Merry Melodies cartoons, the ones that aren't horribly racist and too much to look at now. But the general vibe of a lot of old school cartooning.
And that's very, very important considering what it's a fan fiction of.
Yes.
Trying to make something read like a television show is so hard.
So I think, DJ, if you're ready to go next, you can. If not, I have something ready.
Yes, I am ready to go.
Okay. Hell yeah, I will await.
All right, I was just trying to decide the ordering in which I would read these, and I all right, I got it figured out. Sooner or later, it was bound to happen. On June 30th, 1908, Moscow escaped destruction by 3 hours and 4,000 kilometers, a margin invisibly small by the standards of the universe. On February 12th, 1947, another Russian city, had a still narrower escape when the second great meteorite of the 20th century detonated less than 400 kilometers from Vladivostok, with an explosion rivaling that of the newly invented uranium bomb. In those days, there was nothing that men could do to protect themselves against the last random shots in the cosmic bombardment that had once scarred the face of the moon. The meteorites of 1908 and 1947 had struck uninhabited wilderness, but by the end of the 21st century, there was no region left on Earth that could be safely used for celestial target practice. The human race had spread from pole to pole. So, inevitably, at 0946 GMT on the morning of September 11th in the exceptionally beautiful summer of the year 2077, most of the inhabitants of Europe saw a dazzling fireball appear in the eastern sky. Within seconds, it was brighter than the sun, and as it moved across the heavens, at first in utter silence, it left behind it a churning column of dust and smoke. Somewhere above Austria, it began to disintegrate, producing a series of concussions so violent that more than 1 million people had their hearing permanently damaged. They were the lucky ones. Moving at 50 kilometers a second, 1,000 tons of rock and metal impacted on the plains of northern Italy, destroying in a few flaming moments the labor of centuries. The cities of Padua and Verona were wiped off the face of the earth, and the last glories of Venice sank forever beneath the sea as the waters of the Adriatic came thundering landward after the hammer blow from space. 600,000 people died, and the total damage was more than $1 trillion. But the loss to art, to history, to science, to the whole human race for the rest of time was beyond computation. It was as if a great war had been fought and lost in a single morning. After the initial shock, mankind reacted with a determination and a unity that no earlier age could have shown. Such a disaster, it was realized, might not occur again for 1,000 years, but it might occur tomorrow. And the next time, the consequences would be even worse. Very well, there would be no next time.
So, I would just say that sounds almost like the most sci-fi documentary thing I've ever heard, and I want to hear more.
Yeah, it does have kind of a
Read by you as an audiobook in documentary voice.
you could hear this in, like, if it weren't my voice reading, you could definitely hear this in the voice of Ken Burns or somebody.
Yeah, like it feels like a science documentary or like a history documentary. Like it feels like one of those informative videos that I would hear or that I'd watch when I go to the LA.
Yeah, and it
When I go to the LA Science Center.
And in its documentary way, I would say this really, it hits that requirement that I described of being like a title card to a bigger, wider thing. Like, you can tell this is going to be epic, even if it's not clear exactly what direction we'll spring off into.
It seems like it's going to be like, I feel like the next scene is going to be what introduces us to our characters.
I
But
believe
like
so.
we already have like such a strong world that this thing's about. It's like,
Yeah.
so we know that we are like super duper far in the future. We know that there's been this massive tragedy, but also that this tragedy was intentional and like almost kind of callous. Like, I feel like this is the wrong thing to compare it to, but the first thing to come to my mind is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like how like those aliens like wanted to demolish Earth because it's
Yes,
the way.
the Vogons. The Vogons and the interstellar bypass.
And like,
It's
I kind of
different, but I could see it in them.
aliens that are using Earth for target practice aren't doing it out of malice; they just don't care.
Yes, and
like-
I think the author would have said that the universe is uncaring in that same way. We can't expect anything from it. So the story certainly begins with mankind developing this very firm resolve to do something about it and to be more watchful of our neighborhood.
And I really, really like that, and I would like to see more. Like, it's such a cool sci-fi opening. that like gives us a world and it gives us a premise and it gives us like this kind of like soothing to listen to informational kind of way. It's like engaging entertainment or engaging education, except it's not really education because it's just entertainment. But it's entertainment that's wrapped up in sounds a lot like education.
It's one of those things that gives you historically accurate backfill in a very satisfying way. Not unlike, our friend Jack, for instance.
Yeah, and it like fills
that's a good comparison.
Yeah,
like his
I just wasn't
foreground
expecting
material
you to do that.
is totally zany, but the background fill is kind of like this. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Saul?
So I think I know what this might be from. I think it's something you've talked about before.
Oops.
No, I won't say shit. It's okay. It is an incredible opening though. Like, it's kind of what I would expect from some like 20th century like lit type deal. Like, it sounds like something I would probably read. Where like it hits pretty hard and fast, but also like there's a lot more to this than just like destruction, and I like that. I like things I can unpack. It's also like detailed, but it shows like it kind of reminds me, like, not fully of this, but there's a specific scene in the new Spider-Verse movie. I'm not going to spoil anything, don't worry. But there's like a large building that's like falling down and destroying a huge part of the city, and it could like collapse and kill a bunch of people, and you're just like watching as they try to like stop it, but just like that level of like massive destruction happening so fast.
Yeah, a slow motion catastrophe.
Pretty
or
much.
At least the clock, the perspective has slowed down.
So yeah, it's very good. That's pretty much most of my thoughts on it. I definitely would picture this as being part of a larger sort of like sci-fi apocalypse story, but the resolve of like people coming together is kind of like the theme of the story. It's kind of what I would imagine.
All right, shall I reveal it then?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of a famous 20th century sci-fi book called Rendezvous with Rama. It's by Arthur C. Clarke, and it uses this this great cataclysmic event as a springboard into, I want to say, a couple centuries later, where the focal point of the next couple chapters is that we're watching the solar system for anything that could hurt us, and we find something that completely defies categorization. It doesn't look like an asteroid or a planet or anything else, and it's so weird that we send out a bunch of space explorers to go to that location and find out what the fuck's going on, and that's Rama. It's a great book. I love it. Reading this made me want to go back and reread it.
I think I'd like to see if I can find that as an audiobook because I might be interested in listening to it.
Probably can.
Check out Audible. You probably can.
I mean, Clarke is one of the greats for a reason. Like, he definitely, I feel like, his stuff is varied, but it tends to have that sort of a Ken Burns quality. I mean, he's also the person who gave us 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Just beautiful, operatic, and very ahead of its time. And the uncanny thing was that his predictions always seem to come true.
Sit in my lap. How's that? Do you stop
All right,
crying?
I think I've gone on enough about that. Saul, you want to read one?
I need to quickly zoom out on my artwork, and I'm drawing as we're doing this. I said I would try to get some work done on our characters for this whole podcast shabogle. So I have a few books. None of these I think any of you have really heard of. There's one that I talked about a lot, but it was in a specific thread, so unless you read that thread, you don't know what this book is. And the other two I've mentioned, but I haven't gone in depth about.
All right.
Okay, I'll start now with the first one. About the author. You know those memoirs that people write after they've chatted everything over with those concerned and made sure everybody's good with it, and they just want the writer to feel free to speak their whole truth? This is not that. Wish it was. I have a freakish memory, which starts when I was 9 months old. It is scattered and tattered, but there's lots of it. My bio-hard drive runneth over. I long to dump my whole truth out in the world, make it a thing that exists, has weight and veracity. I think I'd run better. But my family doesn't have those chats. We have chats where I run memory past them and get told it is shit I just made up, which kind of makes the floor go out from under my feet. Then I hyperventilate, get the tingly feeling around my lips, the left chest squeeze, realize that this isn't a panic attack, but the big one. I am finally, genuinely dying. So, kind of want to avoid that conversation. Also, there is a real possibility that some of this is shit I made up. I am a liar. A good one. Most of my family is. We pride ourselves on it. We are bullshitters, grifters, cons, tale tellers, gilders of lilies and punchlines, editors of inconvenient truths, omitters of inconvenient details. Because we like to tell ourselves, we are smarter than every chump we hustle. That's it. I
All right.
stuttered a lot. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. So right off the bat, the thing that grips me about this is the postmodernism of it, which is not. I'm not saying that I understand what the overall style of the book is. More just that it feels postmodern in that I'm not sure if I'm reading if this should really be the beginning of a chapter or if this is actually an about the author page. If the distinction matters, because you're getting everything about author voice here, and the author voice is like very distinctive and very aware of like our modern knowledge and discourse about family trauma. And I'm just not used to that. I like it a lot. It's very interesting. It would grab me.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't know whether to read this or the actual first chapter intro, but I feel like this is basically like I say in quotes, the prologue, but I decided because this would be the first thing you would read going into this book, I read this first.
Yeah, I mean it works. Like a lot of a lot of books I will skip the about the author page or the the foreword, and there's books where you really should not do that.
And I will say this
Yeah,
is a
this would be-
fantastic book. I've read like 99% of it. I'm probably gonna reread it. It's really, really good. So
Operating on the assumption that this was just like the first page, my brain was like, oh, so this is an autobiography?
It feels like a memoir at least.
Memoir or an autobiography. It tells you a lot about the author's like opinions and thoughts on the world. It tells you like it kind of lets you into their brain for a second, if that makes any sense. And I feel like since that being the case, I'd expect that the book itself would be exploring more in depth what their thoughts are. You know?
oh yeah, no, I will talk about the book once you two are done with your overall thoughts.
I think that's kind of my overall thought.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this book is called Wreck, A Very Anxious Memoir. It's by Kelly Jo Burke. Fun fact, this is the same person who was my like creative nonfiction professor in university.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know about this book because we're mutuals on Facebook, and she published it, and I was like, wow, that looks cool, so I bought it, and I love it. So it's great. Like, I'm a little biased, but it is actually a really good book. It is a memoir about like her life, and it goes from like childhood to like now current adulthood, but it all centers around this lighthouse, and it is very much about her anxiety, and the whole thing is kind of structured like it will have current timeline and then like flashbacks kind of like leading up to it. Like it will have like an adult chapter and then a childhood chapter, that kind of thing. and you kind of
Okay.
put the pieces together as you're reading it, which is something I love. And the whole thing kind of builds up to, like, she's looking for her lighthouse, quite literally. Hence the title, hence the whole theming of the book. It's incredible, so yes, I recommend this one.
Yeah, one of my first reactions when you started reading into it was that like, just in terms of authorial voice and this immediate declaration that there may be, that the narrator may be unreliable. It made me think of Chuck Palahniuk. But and then I was immediately like, but the subject matter doesn't quite sound like him. But like, I haven't read all his books. How the fuck would I know?
But I'm glad you like this one, because I think it's a really cool book, so I wanted to give it some airtime somewhere.
Yeah, it seems very cool. It seems like
It's not
something that both my spouse and I would enjoy.
it's
We
not
do a
very
lot of
long
memoirs.
either. And when I post this on YouTube, by the way, I'll have like links to all these books. People can go check them out, read them, whatever.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm definitely getting a list of things that I might look at for audiobooks on.
I don't know if there's an
Still don't.
audiobook for this one, because this is like a local Saskatchewan author, and
That's
there
true.
might be one, I don't know.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Otherwise, I can force myself to read things like for realsies. As you can tell, I've done so much doing that. Reading things with my eyeballs.
It's very well formatted, I will say. So like, it doesn't have like giant text, but it's a very like pretty book as well. So it's not like it's painful to read or anything. So
Yeah, just reading things with my eyeballs as I'm doing. I do have a quick question.
yes,
Is it
ma'am.
alright if the excerpts that I read is more like a page and a half than just a page?
You know what? I'm really into this whole thing, so I'll let it slide. This podcast is probably going to go on for a while anyway, so go for it.
Okay.
If we have to cut it short, we'll
I
do
was
the
just
rest later.
looking at one of the things, and I'm like, I feel like I actually do have to include the two paragraphs that follow the end of the first page.
Yeah, go for it. I'm gonna read the other stuff first, and maybe like my stuff afterwards. We'll see how I feel. Have I changed that?
Okay. So, we good?
Yeah,
Should I start?
you're on.
Okay. Chapter 1, Operation Nightfall. Ever since I've known you, you've been searching for a life greater than that of an ordinary Jedi. A life of significance, of conscience. That is certainly one way to put it. Ever since Sidious had known Anakin, the boy had been wrestling with crippling indecision and inner conflict. Many a seed of doubt the Sith had planted himself, and watched blossom into a garden of weeds, into serpent-like vines interweaving around the boy's heart and squeezing it raw. It is that very fragility, concealed from most by tight lips and Jedi trapping, that renders him such easy prey, inclines his ears for Sidious's every word, even as his life's foundation crumbles under the young man's feet. You're wrong! But an exploitable weakness is a weakness nonetheless. And now, staring into the sizzling azure of Skywalker's blade, steady even in its shakiness, the Sith Lord wonders. Unlike Skywalker, self-doubt is not woven into the fundamental nature of his being, but unchecked arrogance can be just as dangerous a beast. Could he have miscalculated this time? Could he have miscalculated all along? Back aboard the Invisible Hand, Sidious had watched with relish as his beautiful creation had triumphed over Count Dooku and proved himself worthy of taking his place. But had he simply proved himself the superior swordsman? Did he not have to be pushed and pestered into striking the killing blow? Had he not scuttled straight to Kenobi afterward, clung to his Jedi mentor like a toddler to a comfort blanket? Is Skywalker drowning so deep in vacillating waters that he would sooner swim to familiar shore than grab a strange lifeline, just to have another moment to think? Are you going to kill me? Sidious asks. I would certainly like to, confesses an anguished voice, a non-committal answer. I know you would, Sidious murmurs, and yet you lack the resolve. The silence that follows seems to stretch into eternity. Only the low buzz of deadly plasma fills the room. The Force shudders with idle aggression, trembles with untapped potential, screaming to be set free of wavering change. The screams dwindle into resentful hisses as Skywalker lowers his blade and swallows hard. I'm going to turn you over to the Jedi Council. he announces. Ah, yes, the shore has come to call home. Bleak and barren like his birthwood of Tatooine, but it is home. Closing his eyes, Sidious glimpses into the future. What should happen if he lets the boy run along? A series of images flashes across his vision. Skywalker and Windu, soft cheeks streaked with tears, dallying, shallying. Pathetic buffoons playing at Master's chest, swelling with purpose. A blur of blades clashing in the dance of death and desperation. Himself tumbling to the floor, chased to a corner at blade point. His apprentice beaten and burnt and broken, a shadow of what he once was, of what he could be. Sidious's eyes snap open, disgusted by what they beheld. He ought to know better than to place blind trust in the fickle art of foresight, for much of the future remains ever shrouded in mystery, eludes even the most experienced practitioners. But this time, he has seen enough. He will not allow a future that may never survive to witness, where the uncertain victor gets to pick up the charred pieces of Anakin Skywalker. None of this is what he bargained for. Stall and think. Of course you should, but you're not sure of their intentions, are you? Are you even sure of your own? What are his options? Kill him? No, he's essential both for the success of Order 66 and for thriving of the First Galactic Empire. His place as Sidious's chosen apprentice and enforcer of its coming regime is non-negotiable. Why Skywalker? Is he essential? Sidious scoffs. Certainly not because he's such a good company. The boy can be as volatile as Maul and as egotistical as Dooku. Why it is his raw power that sets him apart. It is hardly an exaggeration to say Sidious feels a certain entitlement to that power. How could he not, when he alone knows how to put it to good use? I will quickly discover the truth of all of this, Skywalker declares, and still makes no attempt to leave the Sith Lord's presence. The boy is begging to fall into a trap that Sidious has yet to set up. His frustration knows no bounds. Stall some more. You have great wisdom, Anakin, Sidious offers. I'm sure you will make the right choice, when I leave you with none. Skywalker scowls. Behind a thin smirk, Sidious grits his teeth. For years and years, he had been grooming the boy for a higher purpose, molded and sculpted him for his own design. Sidious created him. The dirty slave urchin would be nothing without him. Is a shred of loyalty too much to ask? A shred or a chip? And that is it. I'm so sorry that was so long.
Oh, no, that wasn't bad at all. Like, lengthwise, I mean. It was also, like, well written, so.
It's so good. Okay, what are your thoughts?
I'm trying to figure out exactly where, because this is clearly fan fiction, but I was trying to figure out where this is divergent from the original stories. Like, you do a good job of setting up, like, God, here I go.
Okay, I can tell you where it's divergent from
The authors did a very good job setting up, like, what is, what's already behind us and what's ahead, and what you don't get in the movies is this tight lens on what the characters are thinking, and
I can tell you where this diverges from canon right now.
Okay.
I did get to that point in the fic, so it's fine. So where they're like having this confrontation, Anakin's like, I'm going to turn you into the Jedi Council. Anakin doesn't draw his blade in the movie. He just kind of panics and runs off. Sidious doesn't stall at any point. So Sidious starts stalling and looking for time and looking to the future is around where it diverges. So instead of letting Anakin go and think this through and angst over it and go tell Windu and get Windu thrown out the window, instead Sidious stops and thinks about it and considers things for a second and is like, wait a second, I still need to manipulate this dingus. So that's where that diverges. So, and the fact that Anakin and Sidious are still having this discussion in the first place, that's the divergence. I'll explain a little more later when I talk about the premise of this fiction.
Yeah,
I read like 3 more paragraphs and it would have like gone a little bit further. I just didn't want to like take it to like 2 full pages.
Yeah, this like, it's very much a, where do we cut so it's a nice even cut. it's definitely, it's got intrigue. Like, I want to know what the fuck is going to be the result of this. And I've heard, I think, little bits and pieces of what comes later than this, but the
I don't
overall contours of it are still
I
missing.
didn't gush about this one yet. Have I? Have I gushed about this one?
I don't know
to
about
me,
Gush,
you
but
have.
okay.
Have I? Because this is the one that I wrote.
Oh. Then, I'm not so sure. I wasn't sure if it was the one you wrote or not.
Not one that I wrote.
Oh.
It's one that I really, really like, though.
I guess I can see why, yeah. It's very, yeah, I don't know how better to put it. It's like just that, it's got that tight lens on Anakin that's really neat.
Soul, what is your thought?
Oh, okay. So, I kind of thought this was your fanfic, but anyway, that's not the point. It is really good. My first thought, aside from me guessing that you wrote it, was like that it kind of exemplifies everything that kind of like both you and DJ like in an opening to a story. Like, is very intrigued. It's not like a fight scene, but like it's a pretty intense conversation. But also, it definitely is going to lead to like a very, I don't know, like introspective story, I think.
Oh, it does.
I would think
Because
yes.
it starts off with just throwing us into the conflict. And I can pretty much garner that the story is going to focus on these two characters primarily and their conflict.
So, the thing I really like about this is that our opening POV character is Darth Sidious, the villain. the thing that I really love when people do is just when somebody opens with the first thought being the thought of Emperor Palpatine, it's just, and like Emperor Palpatine is just like, it's a great way to like look at Anakin through a condescending lens and like look at Palpatine through, Palpatine's own lens instead of like the mask that he wears all the time. So you're not looking at him like, oh, that's the Chancellor, or oh, that's the spooky evil cackling wizard. And so I thought that was a really cool decision.
Yeah.
The story is called My Loyalties Lie, and it's by Strencel, that one writer that I was gushing about earlier.
The same person? Okay, make sure you link the story in our server so I can...
Yeah, let me get a copy paste of it. Copy.
Okay, I want to add something. I figure out how to, like, what it is that really impressed me about this, or what's really fun about it, is you're getting the lens of, like, probably the people, the one character people try the least to empathize with, and yet, even a broken clock is right twice a day. He has some things to say about Anakin that will ring very familiar to viewers, because viewers are like, Anakin, why are you such a bitch?
You just look at Anakin and you're like, you're such a...
And
Anakin
it's funny to find
is
yourself
a
agreeing with
whiny
Palpatine for a
little
second,
fuck.
and Anakin is so wishy-washy.
He's arrogant. He is entitled. He is clingy as all fuck.
Ugh.
I love him. I love him, but also, like, yeah, it is told from the point of view of a character who you aren't supposed to empathize with, but, like, also, like, she does a really good job of making Palpatine feel human, which I think makes Palpatine work better as a villain, because he's just a guy from Naboo, guys. He's not, like, some scary ancient entity. He's just a dude.
A dude with too much power.
Nasty dude.
It's like it's like in Dr. Horrible's Sing Along Blog. It's like, this world is a messed up place, and I just need to rule it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, that is a very interesting story that I have too much to say about.
Yeah, the premise of the story, that My Loyalties Lie, is that instead of letting the whole Mustafar thing happen, and the Anakin barbecue that happens on Mustafar, and like the whole like Anakin being conflicted about his loyalties, does he betray the Jedi? Has he gone too far after the murder of Mace Windu? All that stuff. That doesn't happen because instead Sidious knocks him out and drugs him, drags him to Camino, and then pays Nalase to put a brain chip into his head to just make him kind of just a loyal drone. And then the fic actually mostly focuses on Obi-Wan and Padme, which is spectacular because it's about them trying to figure out how to cope with, first off, the Empire. Second off, Anakin seems to have gone off the deep end.
That is quite a pivot.
And, like, after this intro from Sidious's perspective, and it does go back to his perspective a few times, I think that the next bit, after the whole Nala Say thing, I think that the next bit follows Padme. I think. Past Sidious. Let me just check the next chapter. Next chapter is... Oh, nope, the next chapter focuses on Anakin. Okay, it's chapter 3 that moves on. Anyways, it's extremely good. A lot of the fic focuses on like the aftermath of what happened. There's a lot of trying to save Anakin, a lot of debating whether or not he's savable, whether his actions are on his own volition, all that good stuff. But it's a suitless Darth Vader fic.
Yeah, I don't know if the...
we do love seeing not flambéed Anakin.
True. I don't know if this story would be like one that I would particularly enjoy as much as you, but I will say the intro grabbed me. So it did its job.
I love it so much. But I also love weird, obscure AUs, so. The kind of nonsense I write. Alright, on to your next one, DJ.
Okay. Let's see, which one was I gonna do next? Actually, give me 1 second. I want to get some water.
Okay.
Also, I love how you both thought it was my fic.
Well, it's only because I know you have like a really angsty Anakin one.
Okay. All right, I'm ready.
All right.
I do have an
listening.
angsty Anakin one. I don't actually have the intro finished though, so.
That's fair. Anyway, DJ, here.
Yes. Impact alert, said the ship, booming in my mind. Multiple system failure. Emergency landing advised. Ah, shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits, I muttered. Carlin's litany against fear. I don't know what I expected from my maiden voyage in this diplomatic corps, but not this. My little skimmer, Laurel, had a freak run-in with a tiny piece of asteroid as we exited pocket space back into the Milky Way. Noxious smoke was gathering in her interior, while outside, she was leaking air from a 100-micron gap in a side panel. The dashboard was lit up red like a Christmas tree with too much jolly. Hold it together, Laurel. Take us down. In response, there was a loud squawk of a square wave alarm. Attitude controls inoperable. See, I dreamed of space long before I got acquainted with the extra-dimensional demons that wanted me for their emissary. When I was 6, my gateway drug to computers, arguably to science in general, was a dusty old MS-DOS PC and a little 8-bit shooter called Commander Keen. You play as Billy, a preteen space explorer who built his own ship, the Bean with Bacon Mega Rocket. You have to save the Earth from hostile blue bipedal space dogs. You're also aided by cute little green alien dingbats. I reached for the transmitter switch. Anna, do you read me? I'm in a bit of trouble. Looking back, Keen was also my introduction to the idea that aliens could be cute, which, in my teen years, gave way to aliens being sexy. I'm looking at you, Tali Zora from Mass Effect. The ship's little psi repeater crackled to life, filling my head with the voice of my mentor, Anna. You really didn't retain a word from orientation, did you? Think. You're a half-demon. You can cut past most of the diagnostics if you just put your hands on the plates. Plates, I sent. What? Oh, right. The plates. Conspicuously to either side of the dashboard controls were a pair of shiny metal panels, each with a depression in the shape of an oversized hand. No contours for individual fingers, just a place for some number of digits and a place for an opposed thumb. Perhaps I shouldn't have spent so much of my orientation exchanging dirty text with my long-distance girlfriend. No matter. I reached out and placed my hands on the plates.
So I
I
think
have no idea
that
what this is at all. Wow, what a mystery. Who is this
so
character?
I definitely got that this is sci-fi. And that it's probably urgent because, all that swearing, that says urgency.
Yeah,
Um,
you can say so.
I got that we got a little bit of the world, a little bit of our conflict. Like, we're on a diplomatic mission where in space aliens can be cute. This protagonist probably has a relationship with an alien. So I expect that aliens are extremely important.
I feel like I know
And,
too much to say anything.
Well, what do you think about the mechanics of this as an introduction? Like, I mentioned I have a couple types of introductions I like, and this is definitely one of them.
So this one honestly is like a mixture of like urgent but also really fun. Also, I have to quick draw your attention. We will get back to this, I promise. We got a message in chat from Field Planet 4649 saying Anakin totally wasn't wrong for what he did in the temple.
What?
Wow.
Hold on. What are we talking about in the temple here? Because Anakin slaughtered children in the temple, and I think that was pretty wrong.
I'm not a Star Wars person. I just felt the need to relay that to you and see how you reacted.
My boy Anakin, and I love him dearly. He did just go murder a bunch of children. That is what Anakin does in the temple. Unless we're no, that's what he does in the temple. He goes and slaughters children. Unless we're talking about him arguing with Mace Windu, because he was right to argue with Mace Windu. Windu's kind of a jerk. I do love Mace as well.
Okay, well,
like Mace Windu.
They didn't specify. It could be either one. So anyway, back to.
I'm going to say that he was right for arguing with Master Windu.
Okay,
and I'll agree with that. But he was not right to murder children. It's never right to go and murder children. And it's definitely not right to make your friends help you. Looking at the 501st.
Beautiful. So back to DJ's. Yeah. I don't know if it's DJ's writing or not. I don't know. It is a really good intro though, because it's like entertaining. Like, I already kind of know the direction the story's probably going, because it's probably going to be like urgent, have some action, and have lots of sex scenes. And also the main character's fun, but also kind of like sassy. So yeah, it works for me as an intro at least. It tells me enough about what's going on and it keeps my attention.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it has like some sense of urgency. I honestly wasn't that hooked by it. But I also think that my brain just kind of, I don't know.
I mean, that's fine. It's like you have a type, I have a type.
Yeah.
And,
like, I kind of got like a few things there, but like,
yeah, I had to make a judgment call as to where exactly to cut this. I may as well spill the beans. So this is my story. This is from one of a series of stories about this dude named Sheldon. This particular one is titled Sheldon Sows a Seed. I haven't published it anywhere yet.
I need to fully read this one because I do like what I have seen.
Yes, and you've seen other pieces of this one. what the reader would know if they read previous stories going into this is yes, Sheldon has a relationship with a number of aliens, uh, which is to say that he does a lot of monster fucking, and um, he also has a girlfriend back home, who was mentioned here, and he after a whole series of conflicts where he kind of has to save the world, Loki, and then doesn't, get acknowledged and thanked for it by everyone, but that wasn't the point. After that, he's in a pretty good place in his life, and he gets this job offer, which is to go and sort of spread the word, um, not even the word, to uh, spread goodwill on behalf of the human race that doesn't really even know he's doing this yet, and start building the connections that will eventually lead to Earth being able to actually find out aliens exist, have a relationship with its neighboring worlds, all that good shit. And um, clearly it's off to a shaky start. Which, I just kind of like was spitballing what the technology would be that would let him get from place to place, and I was like, sure, yeah, it could fall apart randomly. And then the result is he still gets where he's going, but he's way off course, and then he has to course correct and figure out what the fuck is going on this foreign planet, and like, where is all the life that was supposed to be here, and what does life look like on this planet? What does intelligent life look like outside of Earth? I love the general premise of the story, and here you're really just getting like kind of a splashy, sassy introduction to him being on his mission.
It's also very Sheldon, might I add. Like, if you know the character, like, if anyone's read your work before, they're gonna, like, be like, oh, it's Sheldon.
Yes, Sheldon is a cool guy whose life is not very much like my own at all, except I get to pour my own author voice into him and be as really, like, freewheeling with it as I want. He's a very strange author insert.
But we do love him for it.
Yes. Yeah, so Saul?
Oh, yeah, no, I can go next. I was just kind of, letting you speak. I think, actually, the person that posted that comment totally bounced after they posted it, so they might have just been here trying to start shit.
I mean, it sounded like flame bait.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah. At least we got a funny reaction out of it.
They did get a funny reaction out of it, but also, I will say on the flame bait thing, I would rather that people come and enjoy the podcast for, like, solid writing advice, not just for me being dramatic.
Well, we do actually have other people who watch it for the writing stuff. Like, this person probably was just being like.
Yeah. I just hope that we don't get too many people popping in to bully me about Star Wars opinions.
No, honestly, friendo, if people are like coming in and being like obnoxious in chat, I'll just kick them. Because I keep an eye on chat anyway, and I'm the one that like relays all the stuff. So like, yeah, if people are coming in here and they're like causing a problem, I'll just slap the ban hammer on them immediately. Like, because this is a writing discussion, so I don't want people.
The example was in fact argue with Mace Windu, and Mace Windu could have prevented all of Star Wars from happening by, instead of telling Anakin to just sit down, Skywalker, if he had just given him something to do, like.
Yes.
Like, if he had just given Anakin a task, Anakin was still pretty loyal to the Jedi at that point. He could have just been like, when Anakin was like, oh, I'll come with you, he could have just been like, oh, no, Anakin, I need you to do this other thing, instead of condescending to him and making Anakin want to rebel against him.
Mace Windu had been more, like, extra Mace Windu-y and just stabbed.
Oh my god. Whenever you're done, I have my thing ready.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, so I got my piece of writing ready. I'll go and we'll see what you guys think.
Alright.
Mission interrupted. Even now, I still don't quite know what happened. The ship and I were in routine Waynet transit, all systems ticking over smoothly. I was deep in thought, a little drunk, rubbing clues together like a caveman trying to make fire with rocks, hoping for the spark that would point me towards the gun. The one no one ever thinks I'm going to find. The one I know with every fiber of my existence is out there somewhere. I was imagining the reception I'd get when I returned to the cohort with that prize. the slate of all my sins wiped clean when they saw it, that I'd actually found it. That it was real after all. And that finally, we had something to use against the Huskers. In the pleasant mental haze brought on by the wine, it seemed likely that they'd forgive me for anything. Or that they would forgive me anything. Then it happened. A violent lurch that sent wine and glass flying across the cabin, a shriek from the ship's alarms as it went into panic mode. I knew right away that this was no ordinary way turbulence. The ship was tumbling badly, but I fought my way to the command deck and did what I could to bring her back under control. Seat of the pants flying, the way Gallinou and I used to do it on Plenitude, when Plenitude still existed. That was when I knew we were outside the Waynet, dumped back into the crushing slowness of normal space. The stars outside were stationary, their colors showing no suggestion of relativistic distortion. That's it.
So that felt kind of angsty, I want to say.
You're not totally off with angst.
Like, I don't know, I just kind of felt like a somber vibe from it.
No, yeah, that's about right for what the entire story is.
It introduces us to like kind of like a somber-y vibe.
I like that you know, in the space in that, you know, the space of that first page or so, they gave us, you know, some emotional backdrop and then throw us into the action. You know, it's gripping, and it's also setting up really question mark. I don't know what it's setting up, but it's interesting.
The intro for me personally was not what gripped me about this story, but the story overall is really, really fantastic.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready, I'll reveal it.
I think I'm ready, Mary.
Yeah, I don't really like. I thought that it was really gripping. I feel like it felt pretty intense, and like it's kind of like trying to build up what we're supposed to like see next.
Mm-hmm.
And I am having a hard time putting words together. I'm very sorry.
So this is the opening page to a story called Minla's Flowers. It is by Alistair Reynolds. It is from a collection of stories of his called Beyond the Equilibria that I own, but you can get this with another story put together. It's honestly one of the best short stories I've ever read. It's obviously it's science fiction. It is about this pilot named Merlin who, it's been a while since I read the full story, but he goes to this planet because he can see that in X amount of years that planet is going to be destroyed, and he goes there just to repair, but then he finds this out and he struggles whether or not he should tell them, and then he does the thing and he tells them, and he gives them as much advice as he can to help them fix it. He kind of interacts with these people. His translator thing isn't working, so there's this entire conlang in the story as well, because there's a big language barrier with him and this planet. And he goes into a cryogenic sleep a few times over. So you get to see the progression of how this planet improves technologically, but how they end up having intraplanetary warfare as they're struggling to figure out what to do about this conflict, about how their entire world might end. And the character Minla is the daughter of a man that he meets immediately, and he gives her flowers. And that's kind of where the title comes from. And he develops this really interesting relationship with her, where he watches as she becomes basically this commander figure, and she tries to lead her people to safety, but she makes some very questionable decisions on the way. And the whole story is about is a monster made? Are monsters necessary? Did she are the horrible things that she did worth it to save the lives that she saved.
That is a ballsy introduction for a short story. Like,
It's a hell of a short story.
He's introduced a lot of plot and a lot of like, um, a lot of information about the technology and what's coming up with, the like, with the people. And I was gonna say the human side, but with the people, not all humans, and
they're humans.
Yeah.
They just speak like a different language. They're from like an alien planet, but they're not like presented as being alien in their appearance.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, that's like impressive but short.
No,
I would like to just
go on, Mary,
question:
sorry.
Is this thing available as an audiobook?
I don't know. I will link it. You can look it up. If not, you can buy a version of it where it's just it and one other story. I really recommend this one. I think it's an incredible short story. It's obviously like it's insanely political. He's doing some like massive commentary with it, but it's done like in such an immersive, interesting way. And the whole thing is like questioning like should the main character have gotten involved? Should he have tried to save this planet, or should he have let life take its course?
Yeah.
I gotta run outside for a second with my dog.
Yeah, no worries. We'll just vibe here till you get back.
You know what kind of makes me think of? Like I feel like this might be slightly off. Just like it kind of makes me think of like the end of Ender's Game.
I actually haven't seen Ender's Game, so
I read it when I was in high school.
Okay, I haven't seen or read. Correct myself.
So basically, Ender's Game is about like this dude Ender who like he turns out to be exceptionally good at this video game that they use to like train kids at this academy to take out this alien threat. And then it turns out that the alien threat that the game was actually being used. Like the kids were playing the game, but they weren't really playing a game. It was actually real, and they were killing the aliens. And then, like in the end, Ender is like, "Wait a second, why have we just been killing these aliens? They aren't actually coming to attack us." And so he like instead wants to like spare the alien queen, which is like a queen ant, because they're just like giant insects. Anyways, explain a plot badly.
That actually sounds really interesting. I might check it out. I feel like I've heard enough about it. I'm surprised I haven't checked it out. It just didn't quite sound like my thing, but that does really intrigue me. But
It
no,
is-
I honestly I
It's a
think
slow
that like
sci-fi.
okay, I think that like this whole anthology is really good. Like Alistair Reynolds himself is a pretty fantastic author. Fun fact, because we're still kind of waiting for DJ, and I can talk about writing. I actually picked this book up because, like, this was when I first met TCR. Like, not first met him, but shortly, like, short-ish into our friendship. And he started asking me to beta read stuff for him, but I've never been much of a science fiction reader, so I was like, well, I can't very well beta read science fiction and give, like, good feedback if I don't have a decent understanding of science fiction as a genre that requires reading science fiction. So I went to the bookstore, one of the bookstores in the city, and I just went up to like one of the workers and I was like, what science fiction do you recommend to help me kind of step into and learn about this genre like as a whole for the specific purpose? And this was one of the books that she recommended, just do it to it being like a big fat like space opera anthology. So
Honestly, if somebody's recommending it to you as like this is like the best piece of this genre to get this genre,
it wasn't like this is the best
funny.
piece. It wasn't like it was the best piece of said genre. It was just like she recommended it to me just kind of for the purpose of like me needing something to read more sci-fi so I could get more accustomed to it as a genre and I could better like analyze it as a beta reader. That way I wouldn't be totally out of my game. I wanted to be more media literate basically, yeah, and this was my way of doing it. And it worked out, and I found an author that I really like, so
you got like a really good short little story here.
Oh yeah, no, this one in particular is up there with the Velt by Ray Bradbury for me. It's pretty fucking awesome.
We still talk about Reynolds.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. We were just
No,
waiting
it's
for
okay.
you.
Just checking. I have not read anything by Reynolds, but like he's a big name, and
I
like clearly that's
this
for
was
a
the
reason.
first that I read of him was this anthology, so.
That's very cool.
So on a quite different topic, before I go into like my next little reading, I picked up some vegan gummy bears from Walmart earlier because I was like, "What? They have vegan sour gummy bears?" And you know what I would just say about them?
Are they
They're pretty good. I just wish that they had more flavors because they're
Hmm.
all one flavor of gummy bear.
Oh,
And this Venice Beach flavor, which is just pineapple. It's a pineapple lemon.
if you're
And
gonna
like
make it
I like
vegan, at least
pineapple
have fruit in
lemon,
it.
okay? I think it's very good. And it has like the texture of like a Swedish fish. But I will say, it claims to be sour and it's not.
I think I know
And
what
I
you're
wish
talking
there was
about,
more
and they're kind of
flavor.
meh, honestly.
The Vigo bears, Venice Beach.
Yeah, they're okay, but
I saw that they were available at Walmart, and I was like, hey, heck yeah, I love sour gummy bears. And since I don't eat gelatin anymore, I don't really eat them very often. I
People
mostly
just-
eat the sour gumdrops that we have at work.
yeah. People will just kind of like buy me like vegan candy sometimes when they see it because they know I'm vegan. That was one that I got from someone, and I didn't hate them, but it's not my like.
They're
I've had
okay.
better.
They have Swedish fish texture, and I do like Swedish fish.
I could just eat
But, like-
Swedish fish.
Swedish fish. I wish that they were more sour because they say that they're sour.
Yeah. Anyway, Mary, what you reading?
Yeah. Hold on. Oh no, Google Chrome closed. Okay. I have to hope that this is still up. It is. Okay. Okay, cool. Rapunzel is walking on a bridge of black stone. Beneath her feet, the rock turns icy blue at her touch, the pale colors flaring out like paint on water, a burst of intense color and then fading wisps unfurling to nowhere. They bloom like flowers beneath her feet, urging her onward. The bridge stretches out into eternity, its start and end hidden by the horizon as soft gray fog. She doesn't know where it goes. The path is cold against her bare toes, so cold it burns, pain tingling up and down her leg. No wind stirs the dry, icy air. Her hair hangs flat and heavy from her scalp, shifting only with her movement, the long strands dragging behind her. Still, she walks on. She cannot say what drives her, only knows in her heart that she must keep moving, unless it is then that Rapunzel realizes she's not alone. There is nothing else. No world beyond the stone path. No people. Just the bridge, the fog, and the void surrounding them all, and Rapunzel walking an endless road, going nowhere, with no one. Fear strikes her heart. She is alone. She is alone on a bridge of icy stone, and the path is so, so cold. Eugene? Cass? Is anyone there? Her voice echoes, bounces back to her, growing louder and fiercer. It is mocking her. Is anyone? Is anyone? Is anyone there? No, the silence seems to say. There is no one here but you. Please, Rapunzel says. Beneath her feet, the colors bloom. Bright, burning blue, polar white, shining and gleaming like gems. Cold as ice and just as merciless. In the distance, Rapunzel can hear screaming. Her head snaps around, heart hammering to her chest. She knows that voice. She knows it. No! Rapunzel turns on her heels and runs blindly into the distant horizon. She runs until her feet ache, until her breath squeezes, until her hair falls back on her scalp as heavy as a ball and chain. She runs until that awful blue turns blinding yellow, unless those hauntingly familiar screams fall quiet. The fog is lighter here, glowing a soft and unworldly gold, like the sunrise or the corona lantern. It leads her onwards now that the screams are silent. Except no, Rapunzel realizes as she reaches the source of that gentle light. Not gold after all. Amber. A man encased in the glowing amber, and a small form collapsed at his feet, shoulders bowed and shaking. Rapunzel walks to the boy's side, hesitates, leans down to touch his shoulder. Marion, she says. Her words are blank, calm, absent, devoid of any feeling, wiped clean of any anger, any betrayal. As unbothered as the icy road she walked upon. In her chest, her heart twists. Varian looks up at her touch, meets her gaze, without flinching. His eyes are swollen and rimmed with red, tears running freely down his face. He does not seem to notice them, or perhaps it is that he doesn't care. His face is calm, just like Rapunzel's. His eyes shine, free of anger, of hatred, of pain, of anything. The amber glow ignites the air around them. The fog shies away from the amber grave. From them, the stone path beneath their feet begins to crumble, turns to rubble, turns to ash. The dust flies up in the air like fireflies, a hurricane of ruin and smoke. It has to be me, Varian says, and the world burns gold, as fierce and as blinding as the sun. It has to be me.
Oh shit,
So what
is
do you
that
think?
it? So
Yeah,
DJ has stepped out briefly, so I'm just going to kind of like do my best to be an all-encompassing reaction.
I didn't realize that DJ left because I was... Oops.
I mean,
Sorry.
he can always watch this back later. Something must have come up. That's not a big deal. We can still do this with the two of us back and forth for a bit. So,
yeah.
Alright. That is such a, like, it's not, like, somber necessarily, but it's very atmospheric because, like, I honestly had more of an image of just, like, the setting that she's in more than what's totally going on. It's an interesting intro because it doesn't give us a whole lot in terms of overall story content and conflict, but it gives us a lot in terms of, like, tone and atmosphere of what the story's probably going to be. Like, the intro of, like, a horror story, for example.
Oh, yeah, it is kind of horror story-esque. I think the story had some horror elements, too.
Yeah, because
like,
that's what I would immediately put this as, is some sort of, like, horror-esque story.
One of the tags on it is facing your fears and dealing with your problems.
Oh yeah, okay, that sounds about fitting. It's pretty like it's definitely very enthralling, if you will, because you read it and you're like, whoa. But you're kind of pulled in just to the setting itself, even more so than what the story might immediately be about. So it works as a way to get the reader in there, and then from there I assume you would have to go pretty quickly into the conflict and what's going on in the characters' heads, but
so looking at this, I really, really love how it feels almost like, or not almost like, it feels like a dream. It is presenting to you this strange atmosphere of a world, and like the absence of characters tells you a lot. Like, you're just following Rapunzel, and like Rapunzel is alone, and then like when another character appears, it's kind of out of an abyss and in a really upsetting circumstance, and the only words he says is, "It has to be me," which also kind of adds to the aloneness, because like I feel like the first thing that you're getting is that Rapunzel's alone and then Varian is also alone, and it's also somber and empty and cold, and like you kind of want to look at these characters and be like, oh, you two are both suffering. It is getting the suffering energy going. So
no, it really
this
is.
is the story that I was looking for when we opened. I was like, I can't remember its name. I found it.
Hell yeah.
I found it via asking someone else who was also into it, into Tangled the series at the same time I was.
That explains the Tangled talk when I popped into the chat.
Yeah,
to sort of the
so
controls.
Tangled the series, great show. The first 2 seasons are very good. I didn't like season 3. I also didn't like the ending of season 2. But anyways, the story is called Labyrinth of the Heart. It's by Isabel Witt. Let me go ahead and pull up a link.
Yeah, just post her, and then I will deal with the editing and whatnot and posting it in like the description of the video.
If I remember correctly, the premise of this story was that instead of Rapunzel going about the season 2 of the show with just like Cass and Eugene and Lance, she instead looks and like is like, okay, so we're following this mystery, and I feel like I have an obligation to bring Varian along, even though he betrayed the kingdom and like tried to kill us. He did it out of a place of hurt and out of a place of I didn't help him when I should have, so I owe this to him.
Right.
And so she brings Varian on this adventure in an effort to try to rescue his father and redeem herself to him, but also acknowledging that he is an insane alchemist who did nearly kill every member of the royal family.
Okay.
And so this is a story about like they're following the Black Rock's path, trying to find out why why they're here, why they're just sprouting up everywhere and destroying everything in their path. And it's about the interpersonal relationship between Rapunzel and Varian.
It is a very good introduction. So I very much enjoy how that came out.
Yeah, let me see if I can find the actual summary of it. Okay, the summary is: plagued by cryptic dreams, Rapunzel leaves to find the origins of the Black Rock and face her destiny, only this time she takes Varian with her. Basically, It's a rewrite of season 2 of Tangled the series, except it's better writing.
Okay. I'll bite. Honestly, sometimes we need that with that.
One antagonist to not have his character arc resolved. Because, gosh, this is kind of turned into me ranting about the 3rd season of that show. Anyway,
we can try to curb the ranting and move on to DJ's next reading.
Yeah, is DJ still here?
Yeah,
Welcome back, DJ.
I am so sorry. I think my spouse and I just realized that this time slot may not work for us unless we time box our things going forward, like to 12:30 or so.
We can definitely figure something out. Yeah, no worries. I figured this was going to be a longer one, so.
Yeah, for now we can go until about 1:15 local time. Another half hour. So.
Whenever you have to leave, like for good, no worries. Let us know. If we want to continue something as a group, we'll move it to a later podcast.
Yeah. All right. So yes, let me dig up my next one. What was I going to start with? Okay. I lived long enough to see the cure for death, to see the rise of the bitchin' society, to learn 10 languages, to compose 3 symphonies, to realize my boyhood dream of taking up residence in Disney World, to see the death of the workplace and of work. I never thought I'd live to see the day when Keep a Movin' Dan would decide to deadhead until the heat death of the universe. Dan was in his 2nd or 3rd blush of youth when I first met him, sometime late XXI. He was a rangy cowpoke, apparent 25 or so, all rawhide squint lines and sunburned neck, boots worn thin and infinitely comfortable. I was in the middle of my chem thesis, my 4th doctorate, and he was taking a break from saving the world, chilling on campus in Toronto and core dumping for some poor anthropology major. We hooked up at the Grad Students Union, the GSU or Gazoo for those who knew, on a busy Friday night, springish. I was fighting a choral slow battle for a stool at the scratched bar, inching my way closer every time the press of bodies shifted, and he had one of the few seats, surrounded by a litter of cigarette junk and empties, clearly encamped. Some duration into my foray, he cocked his head at me and raised the sun-bleached eyebrow. "You get any closer, son, and we're gonna have to get a prenup." I was a parent 40 or so, and I thought about bridling at being called son, but I looked into his eyes and decided that he had enough real time that he could call me son anytime he wanted. I backed off a little and apologized. He struck a cig and blew a pungent, strong plume over the bartender's head. "Don't worry about it. I'm probably a little over-accustomed to personal space." I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard anyone on World talk about personal space. With the mortality rate at 0 and the birth rate at non-zero, the world was inexorably accreting a dense carpet of people.
Alright, that's a pretty interesting introduction, honestly. I like the dynamic that we already have.
I like the narrator. It's kind of got like this kind of fun. You do kind of have to like the narrator.
Yeah. The narrator knows about this world and is very,
very, very flippant in their words.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think eloquent is the way to put it, but like they have a very fun way of describing the universe around them.
Yeah, I think of it as an appreciation for the absurdity of the, utopian future.
Yeah.
Just the utter absurdity.
And also,
And-
the the personal space doesn't exist. Oh gosh, that sounds like a horrible world to live in. But the way that that our narrator describes it is kind of a silly kind of way. They're like, yeah, personal space. What's that?
Yeah, and I think it was apt that the book starts like the very first character other than the narrator that's introduced is Keep a Moving Dan, because he's by far the most colorful. And there are some very colorful characters, but like it's not like the body mods or the anything else. It's just his personality. Like he's this old west feeling kind of dude in a very modern future, and it's wild.
It's very fun.
Honestly, I would continue reading it. I think that intro is very like it's
got
got
such a
a very
campy
fun
vibe
vibe
to
to
it.
it.
And it's
got
got
like this pure fun camp.
it's got the hook, right? Like
Yeah,
you
it's
know
got the
you know certain things, you don't know other things, but you've been told already that somehow this is going to involve a bunch of words you don't understand in relation to this character you're just meeting, and that he's going to do the unexpected when he's already hard to predict.
and like it just if I read this intro and then I read on to the rest of the story, I am expecting fun, campy nonsense. And like I
Yep.
feel like if whoever wrote this intro could write that intro, then they can continue to write more fun, campy nonsense.
Yes,
And I
it
say
is definitely
nonsense, like lack of a better word. Like
it's a
I'm sure the
demonstration.
story has like plots and stuff, but like it's fun and it's campy.
Yeah, you know right away this book is campy and this book has ideas.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't even manage to fit in like the next couple paragraphs where it starts to talk about things like reputation currency and all the other ways this world is different, but you get some of it already.
Yeah, it starts telling you about the world, which is really fun. Like, we are introduced to the world first.
Honestly, pretty rad. And I do like the world. It sounds genuinely interesting.
Yeah. So, this is the introduction to Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom by Cory Doctorow.
Oh, you've talked
I've read-
about this.
Yeah, I've read a couple of his books, and they're all interesting in different ways, but this is by far the most fun and the most zany of the ones I'm aware of. And it does an interesting thing, which is I would not technically describe this as a dystopian book, but I would say it is it describes a utopian humanity in which fucked up things can still happen because we're still people. Like,
Yeah.
It doesn't really come up like the book has subtle critiques about reputation currencies and about various other, imagined future things that people have postulated about, but none of them is really like I wouldn't say that any of them is really an accusation that this stuff is fundamentally broken and will never work. It's more, well, once we've solved these problems, we got to solve this hilarious problem, because in a world where and it's also manages to combine both like horrifying, like a couple of moments of horrifying slapstick violence and gore, with it still feeling like a pleasant slice of life, because he's already started to hint at the fact that nobody dies, which is to say, when someone does die, they get rebooted from backup. And so the next thing, like, we're gonna get a little bit further into world building, and then there's a murder, and the rest of the premise of the rest of the book is someone solving his own murder. That's cool.
That's incredibly fun. Like,
Alright.
that is just fun, campy nonsense.
yes.
I love that.
And as the book
Very much like to read this book. This sounds
and as the book indicates, it takes place largely in the setting of a bunch of hackers like trying to rejigger Disney World to their liking.
which is hilarious. As Walt Disney World is the size of a city, so you could.
Yeah, you could live there. You could find infinite things to do there, and
It is the size of a city.
And you could apparently get killed there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. It's the size of a city. Anything could happen. I would
Yeah.
very much like to read this. It sounds like fun, campy nonsense, and that's the
Yes.
one I look for.
I would say it qualifies as fun campy nonsense. There's like some interesting ideas, but it's not it's not at heart like
A guy solving his own murder as a premise is already very fun.
yes.
I think I also have this interesting perspective of I work at Disneyland and know about the internal workings of, Disney parks. So
Yeah.
they better watch out. I hope that they describe Walt Disney World correctly because I don't know. I
I feel like you should read this book and like critique it for us. I would love
Curious
to see
about
that.
because I get the impression that Doctorow is someone who really, really does his homework, but at the same time, you'll be like tracking a moving target because this is a Disney World where a lot of stuff has already been modified from
That's
what it is
true.
today. And
That's true. You could be like, oh well, I mean, maybe they installed this thing, but if they use popular rumors that are incorrect, I will test it.
okay, well, I'd be very curious about that.
Popular rumors that are incorrect are the main thing that annoys me about Disney creepypastas.
Yeah,
Honestly,
okay.
valid. I have my next one chosen. I just had to bust this out earlier than I originally intended.
All right.
Okay, we're
Yeah.
listening.
All right. I will attempt to read this as eloquently as I can. I shouldn't fuck this up too bad.
Believe in you.
Under a blanket of stars, night enveloped the forest. Voices carried through the cool air as grass and leaves danced with the breeze. Raylan Lutelner heard the soft crunching of twigs and dead leaves with each step, walking between the tall, twisted trees farther and farther as the voices became clear. "Look at it run," one said. Another voice, a boisterous laugh followed. Then there was a pained cry, a high-pitched chirping. Raylan quickened his pace. He weaved through the black trees, pushing branches and leaves from his face. The laughter continued as Raylan pushed through into the opening. His crimson eyes widened at the sight. His lips quivered, his hands balled into fists. The two human men stood in front of a large tree. The taller man had a dark brown mullet, the other a lighter brown ponytail. The shorter held the hilt of a dagger stabbed into the bark. The blade was driven through the bloodied tail of a small brown squirrel. Nailed to the tree, the young rodent flailed and cried in anguish. All the while, the two men laughed giddily. Raylan burst out from the trees, facing towards the two men. He extended a hand towards them and lowered the other to the hilt of his sword. "What are you doing?" he shouted. That's it, you go. I bet you have no idea what the hell that is.
Oh yeah, I have no idea who wrote this. I
Yeah,
have no idea
it's a mystery, alright?
I definitely never tried to read this before. Anyways,
Yeah, it's
so
a very
I really
strange person.
like how we were introduced to our first view of our protagonist, Raylan, is him doing something that is seemingly selfless. It's not something that he necessarily needs to be doing, but it is just kind of an act of good. And I think that it is a good presentation of our protagonist, and it shows a good start line. It also shows that the world itself, we're starting with these two unnamed characters, these guys just doing an animal cruelty for no apparent reason other than because they think it's funny, which is a thing that people do. People suck. And so we have this dichotomy of what kind of things people are like. We have a fundamental rule of the world and a fundamental good of a person. And I think that is an interesting opening, and it tells us a lot about what kind of story we're going into, especially since it opens with casual animal cruelty.
Yeah, there's a number of things I noticed right away going on here, and one of them is definitely that, like, there are definitely stories where terrible things happen, but I can't think offhand of many where it goes this hard into the world being this shitty, on the first page or two, and and the other thing is that not that I know exactly who wrote this, but
Yeah, no,
that
he's a really strange
but
guy, I've heard.
but the thing that but the other thing is the protagonist seems like someone who is uh, unmoored. He's not shown by as accompanied by anyone, and I would venture to say that he is not a particularly privileged individual, not you know in his own place, and then you see you know two white dudes. Actually, no, it doesn't say they're white dudes, but I read them as being men of privilege, and they're just being complete total assholes, and they're also not identified. Uh, and this is in no way a recurring theme. The idea that um, that the people who witness violence and cruelty are the ones who are given their identities, and they're usually complicated identities. And then you have people with simple, privileged identities that are not named that are doing horrible shit because, well, it's believable. There doesn't need to be a reason we suck.
Thank
Humans
you
suck.
for the detailed responses. This is so I should just say it. I wrote this. It's basically my magnum opus. It's called The Value of a Heartbeat. I swear I'm gonna release it this year. Hold me to it. I've revised
Oh,
this opening a lot,
Right.
so
yes, and it's a very interesting first page followed by a couple more extremely interesting pages that also set up the rest of the book. Is it not?
yeah, I wrote it that way on purpose because like the whole story it's about a lot of things, but fundamentally at its core, it's like what is the value of a life? What are you willing to do for the freedom of that life kind of thing?
Yes, and like post-traumatic flashbacks are everywhere. Like page 2, I think.
Oh yeah, pretty much right after this. Page
Yep.
2 is you have the PTSD stuff kicks in, although I don't name it, I just kind of put it there, and like I said, I expect people to figure it out. Like, I don't tell you in the opening who Raylan is or that he's not human, but I expect that you'll catch on given that he refers to them as human but not as himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I thought of it at the time as PTSD, but what it was getting at was very clear because you see, human on animal cruelty followed by elf on human cruelty, followed by Raylan snaps. Like, it's not hard to follow.
Yeah, no, it's reminding him clearly of a loss that he has, and that's why it like makes him see red.
And it
basically.
makes him such a wonderful character to be along for the ride with, because he is so angry, and his anger is 110% justified, and like, I mean, as Mary said, the results, you could say it's righteous, but you could also just say you know he can't stand to see how shitty the world is.
You know, the interesting part too is I've had like really mixed responses to like this opening. I've been told that it's too confusing. I've been told that it makes him out to be too violent, but I've also been told that it's like really ballsy and amazing. I've gotten like people either love the opening of the book or they'll think that the character is like awful immediately. And there's not really an in between for him.
So amazed that people think that he's awful from that opening because, like,
Yeah,
Awful isn't the right
the
word,
first
but
thing
I've
I
had
noticed.
multiple people think that he's like too aggressive in the opening of the story, and then tell me that like they can't really get on with his character because they think he's responding too aggressively.
it's
Me
definitely
coming from a place of somebody who has worked at an animal shelter and who has been the insane person who will run out in front of traffic to like stop a car from hitting a dog because I'm
Well,
bigger than the dog and the drivers
I
will stop if it's a woman.
yeah, I
And like,
had like
I
a
don't think that lunging out at people who are abusing a squirrel, I don't think that's too violent a response. I think that Raylan is totally 100% in the right
he
here.
also like brutally murders them, but spoiler I know.
Saying that it is
But I think
but like
like
in context. it's not really a question of is he right or is he wrong. Just like the difference between him and and anyone else, if there is one, is that he knows he can change what's going on here, and he's willing to risk his life to do it.
Oh yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
he has another option.
Raylan is somebody
he's
who
got
takes
more
a step
balls
a
than
little too
brains.
far,
Yeah,
but he takes the step a little too far in the right direction.
he's very much a Robin Hood-esque hero, very unconventional. But I have
Yeah.
like a theory, if you will. The people who get really on board with his character and the people who don't, it's like the people who don't super get on board with his character are the ones who are more likely to, this is like a hot take if anyone watches this who didn't like his character, I'm sorry, but they're the people that are more likely to dehumanize people different from them. Whereas if you are more kind of on board with his immediate response to seeing this vulnerable squirrel being like mutilated like this, it's usually people that are more empathetic and kind of ignore those differences. Because like the whole thing is very representative of what the story is about, and the story is about like cruelty, especially cruelty to people who are different from you. That like bigotry basically, and that's what this is hugely representing. Like it is just a squirrel, but it's also a life. It also doesn't deserve this. And where do you draw the line with like what, like who you'll empathize with? What differences will cause you to be like, oh, that person deserves that cruelty, or you're the kind of person who will be like, no one deserves that cruelty? And that's kind of how this opening like messes with people, I've found, just seeing responses to it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
Um,
I've noticed a trend.
Yeah, you know, it's work that hits hard and hits like in a more moralizing place than some people are comfortable with. But like, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Like you know, fiction should have a sense of right and wrong.
it
I
should.
I write a lot of things to be intentionally very uncomfortable and to point out very uncomfortable truths in a world that likes to kind of ignore those truths. So, yeah.
Yes.
But I should stop and we should move on to the next person. I don't want to ramble too much.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this going to be the last round, or is there another round after this?
Technically, I had 2 more rounds. However, I am willing to alter this because this has gone on for like a while. I had 2
Yeah,
more I
Yeah.
wanted to read, but I will adjust. No worries.
Yeah, because I'm
Okay.
not gonna be able to read my 2 next ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys
Because-
want to just stop here for the night and then reconvene in like a week or two and read our other like selections and pretty much just like do like a part 2 to this?
That seems like a good idea.
It's just that I was concerned that like DJ was going to like have to like leave, and like I also have 2 more. I also have 2 more excerpts.
So we all have 2 more? Okay, so I think what we can do is we can like pause here, and this will be like a big massive 2-parter, and we'll reconvene and we'll do our other 2 parts, and we'll just kind of discuss at the end of that, based off of everything we've read and discussed, what an opening can be, what it is, all the possibilities.
Okay, and for our closing, I'd like to just discuss like what our favorite openings were.
I
If we
mean,
could.
yeah, no, we can take a turn, discuss the favorite openings that we've heard so far, and we can close on that.
Yeah.
All right,
So
I will attempt to have a good memory.
DJ, what's your favorite opening that we read?
Oh, the ones we've done thus far.
Yeah, that we've done thus far.
Let's see. I think the Reynolds one, and actually one from each of you guys. I really like that. I really love the intro to the Cuphead story, and of course the Value of a Heartbeat, which I've read the whole thing and I love it.
Thank you.
Just being like, yeah, so I love your 2 writing. Anyway, the flattery. Thank you.
Reynolds is a good choice too. I love that one.
Reynolds
Yeah,
always
and of course,
good.
like I have an infinite soft spot for Arthur C. Clarke. So Rendezvous with Rama is up there somewhere as well.
Rendezvous with Rama was the one that was like a documentary, right?
The one with the asteroid, yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that was my favorite. I think that kind of hit all of my like this is kind of informative, kind of just like super like engaging in a documentary style way. Like I think that was definitely my favorite, and then, like my other favorite was Value of a Heartbeat. Of like these were the two like the strongest openings that we got.
You
Yeah,
don't
that's a
need to
sucker
just
punch.
be nice to me just because you know. Like,
No, but like also who you saw?
I finished blushing now. Thanks for that. I really like from Mary specifically for between yours. It's kind of a tie between your Cuphead one and the Star Wars one that you read. Those two were really fantastic.
Fredell is such a good writer.
Yeah. From the ones I read, I'm gonna pick. Honestly, I'm gonna pick Wreck because Kelly Jo Burke is just a fantastic writer, and that whole memoir just like really hits. It hits every beat. So I love that opening, especially. It really like lets you know what you're in for. And from DJ, my mind is slipping on some of the names. It's a combination of the Sheldon Saga one because I love Sheldon, but also the last one you read with the Western
Oh yes,
Cory
Down and Out
Doctorow.
in Magic Kingdom.
Doctorow?
Yep.
Yeah, that one was really good.
It's so wild and so out there.
It really catches you in like a very fun way, and of course your intro is very like very Sheldon, so I really can't complain.
Yeah, and you can tell like I like the what I write reflects some in particular certain authors that I read.
And for the record, yes, my taste is very malleable, and I read just about like everything. I thought all the openings that we read tonight were like hits anyway, so.
Yeah, I think that we all just picked our favorite openings. To be fair.
Yeah.
Next question is of your own openings that you picked, which one was your favorite?
The only one that I read so far for this was Taboo, so I think I'm obligated to pick that. I think the best story that I've written and the best story opening I read is The Frost That Killed the Flower, but that one is a little bit too much for this podcast.
Yeah, I think actually the strongest, like at least out of my own writings, the strongest one that I brought to the table, we didn't get to read tonight. You'll hear it next week.
I'm stoked.
That's
Um,
the
but
strongest
yeah,
opening I've ever written was.
but it's hard to outdo Rendezvous with Rama, like, you know, from the professional authors on this list.
Oh yeah, no, that
Yeah,
was really good.
I would definitely agree. Rendezvous with Rama is. I would like to read that actually.
Well, when I edit
so-
this and post this, I will link all the books in the description. So if there was anything that you guys liked from like each other, like just go through the description and viewers as well. Like there'll be links to everything. And our
Yeah,
stuff.
stop it.
Yeah.
So
But we
my
should
favorite
close up
opening that
shop.
I've written. My favorite opening that I've written, because I didn't do mine yet. My favorite opening that I've written was the one that you guys both complimented. It's the only good opening I've ever written, actually.
I mean, you'll write
True,
more, you know, as you go on. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
My favorite of the ones that I selected though was the one that I took way too long to find, which is Labyrinth of the Heart, Tangled
That
one.
one was really good too. Yeah.
It was so good.
But I dropped my can. I'm gonna close up shop for tonight. I did not mean to keep y'all so late, but thank you for sticking around.
Yep, I'll see you guys next week or whenever we do this.
Yes, we'll plan a rendezvous to finish this up somewhere in the middle of the month. But anyway, have yourselves a great night. Thank you for coming.
Nice night. Bye.
Good night.
One, two, three.
Yeah, so much. So we're hi, I'm Saul. Solomon, the grand leader, the terrifying. I'm kidding. I'm rather boring actually. Uh and then of course I have my wonderful co-hosts, DJ and Mary. You two can introduce yourselves again.
Hi, I'm Mary. I've never had an original thought in my mind. DJ, your turn.
Um, I am DJ, and I am distracted by dogs. Um,
Hey.
and I write stuff, weird stuff. Okay, that's an intro.
Those are all very accurate introductions, yeah. Um yeah, I write pretty like violent actiony things, but I think I make that pretty clear, so you know, there's that. So this is a continuation of our last podcast, which we we're talking about like how to start a story and all the various ways that you can start a story. So we are reading the intros of works, including some of our own, and we're dissecting them, and then we're gonna like talk at after we're done about like the topic, in a bigger, more grand sense after we've given specific examples. We each have two each left to read. One of them is something from something we've written. One of the other one's like something else that we've selected. And thanks to Mary who came up with this idea, we're gonna just read like each of us is gonna go and we're gonna read both of them and discuss both of our like intros that we've picked, and then the other two hosts have to guess which one that person wrote. Just for fun.
This is either going to be an extremely easy game or an extremely hard one.
I think that may vary from person to person.
I think for me, it will be very
Mary already
easy.
told us once.
Yeah.
On
You told us
accident! It's just the stuff I read and the stuff I write is just extremely similar.
But yeah, I think that you two can kind of like decide who wants to go first, and we'll roll with that, and I'll go last.
Oh, okay. DJ, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You first.
Okay, me first. Okay. Okay, let's get into reading mode. Stitch, stop staring at me. Sorry, my dog decided he was gonna like tilt his head and be dog. Anyway. There was no putting a happy face on it. Obi-Wan Kenobi had messed up. He betrayed Anakin's trust and put him through an incredibly traumatic and scarring experience. What had he been thinking? Well, he knew exactly what. He thought he could take advantage of Anakin's emotional nature for the sake of the mission and use his genuine reaction to sell his fake death and buy him credibility in the bowels of the criminal underworld that he was about to enter into. Of course, it sounded even more horrible now that he put it into words. Yes, there had been a certain thought process involved. But perhaps for once it would have been better had this awful mess simply been the result of thoughtlessness and not a deeply twisted string of reasoning. So much hurt and heartbreak could have been avoided if he just let Anakin, and honestly Ahsoka too, in on the plan from the beginning. He'd acted defensive about it at first, but now that he really reflected on the matter, it had been cruel and hypocritical of him to take advantage of Anakin's attachment to him after years of bombarding him with lectures on the dangers of attachment. And a lot of advantage that stunt had gained him in the end. Under the guise of providing assistance, but in reality driven mad by revenge, Anakin had almost single-handedly derailed the mission, not to mention killed Obi-Wan with his own hands. Perhaps the Jedi Master would have been quicker to own his error of judgment, had his fake death become a reality after all. Had the last remains of Anakin's sanity been destroyed by grief and self-blame. Grief, self-blame, and unbridled, unimaginable rage. Obi-Wan didn't like to think about Anakin's certain predisposition to temptations of the dark side, but how could he continue to turn a blind eye after something like this? Communication had never been their strong suit, but after the dust had settled, they would have to start talking, really talking. Anakin was the finest man he knew and the greatest Jedi of his generation, if not all time, but Obi-Wan knew he struggled with the code, with the expectations placed on his young shoulders, and with his own emotional stability. He didn't really expect that someone as exceptional as the Chosen One would ever completely fit into the Jedi mold, or satisfy the Council's idea of a perfect poster boy, but he wouldn't have to. All Obi-Wan wanted was to be able to understand Anakin better, to find a way to connect with him. Let him know he could always come to his old master with his troubles, that he could trust him. Of course, he would have to start by apologizing to him first, or there wouldn't be much left to salvage. Obi-Wan sighed and paced around the room as he waited for a nanodroid to finish initializing the surgery program, filling the otherwise deserted transformation chamber with a low humming noise. To pass time, he stepped into an adjacent pressure to take one final look at himself in the mirror. Beardless, hairless, and thoroughly ugly, a wry smile crossed his torn, curved lips. Of course, he would still be beardless, hairless, and quite arguably ugly, even after his original features were restored. Without his trademark beard and neatly combed hair, he would still be wearing a stranger's face when he apologized to Anakin. He'd look absolutely ridiculous. The top of his face would shine like the freshly scrubbed floor of the council chamber. Maybe he could trick Anakin into poking fun at his expense. That would at least give him something to work with. Okay, so are we going to discuss this, or do I just move on to the next one?
I muted myself by accident. I think because we need a level of, like, consistency with how we handle the discussion, we should dissect this one first, like how we did the other ones, but you just don't reveal the full context of the story or the author yet, and then you'll read the second one, then we'll rinse repeat, and then you'll discuss both the author and the bigger context of the story.
Okay.
Sounds
so
good.
What are your thoughts?
It's immediately just jumping into, like, character introspection, but it's also giving us, like, backstory and kind of, like, story information, so, like, we kind of know what built up to this, but it's kind of just the character going over it before he goes off to do something else. So I feel like it gives us a very strong idea of, like, narrator voice and maybe the author's writing style and what they're, like, interested in focusing on.
Okay.
It gives us a very clear picture of the fact that it gives us a very clear picture of Obi-Wan's thought process is useful because immediately I hear, like, him describing what he has done, and I'm like, this doesn't sound like the Obi-Wan that I know. Like, he was young enough to make his share of mistakes, but, like,
ow. Oh, the mistake is something he does in canon.
But this just sounds so what's the word? Well, maybe you're right. Maybe it's really all just, like, that they did a good job of the framing of this, but I'm like, what the fuck is going on? This sounds like a much more cynical Obi-Wan Kenobi.
It was... Okay, so I'm gonna give a little bit of context. This takes place right after the Reiko Hardeen incident, which is an arc in the Clone Wars in which Obi-Wan fakes his own death and uses, like, this, like, technology thing to disguise as someone else so that he can spy, so he can get more information in the criminal underworld to help stop an assassination of Chancellor Palpatine.
I don't know how it is that I don't...
Tell that he died, they don't let Anakin in on the plan, and let Anakin actually think he died.
Huh. You know,
and then
I don't...
At the end of the arc, Obi-Wan tries to apologize, and Anakin is like, no, I can't talk to you. And then after that, just kind of pretends to let it go, but then there's, like, a little rift between them. So that's what happens in canon.
I don't remember this arc from the show, and I've seen all 6 or whatever seasons.
The Reiko Hardeen arc. It was almost painful to watch because...
Yeah, maybe I just blocked it out.
You kind of just don't root for anyone. Except Cad Bane. I rooted for Cad Bane.
That's fair. He's consistent, at least.
I love Cad Bane. Anyways, this had nothing to do with Cad Bane.
Right. So, okay, this is interesting. It's talking about in-canon stuff.
It's recapping a canon event.
Yes.
But from the perspective of, like, I tried to apologize and it didn't work, and I should apologize for realsies.
Yes. So, that's interesting. It's giving us, perspective on stuff we already know about.
Yeah.
And
Which is something that like you can do in fan fiction and get away with very well, and it works very well. But like in original work, that would be like such a weird way to open a
yes,
story.
yes, I've seen it done to death in like Harry Potter fan fictions back when that was a thing that I read.
It is a distinctly fan fiction way to open it. That's true.
But it's not a bad
Ask
thing. It's just
where in
yeah.
canon you are. I think
It's
it's an important thing in fan fiction to do sometimes, because sometimes you just gotta
it,
be like, where in the timeline is this? Because sometimes things will change if it's in or out of character depending on where it happens.
oh, for sure. All I really meant to say by that is that like personally, if I was reading like an original novel and this is how it opened, I would be tearing it a new asshole. But because it's fan fiction, it's like fine and actually like a decent way to open a story.
Yes,
If it
agreed.
was an actual novel, I would expect the entire story would have to be littered with like what this person's feeling guilty about. Like, let's pretend for a second that this isn't Star Wars fan fiction. That's Obi-Wan guilting and deconstructing what he was thinking during a canon event. If something opened with a character deconstructing what they were thinking during a canon event, I would expect the rest of the story to be about that event.
Well, yeah, for sure. It would have to be unpacking it, or else it doesn't make any sense that it's this focused on.
And as it
Yeah.
is, all we're really getting is author voice and, you know, sort of a bit about how the author conceptualizes the sequence of events. Like, I imagine if, you know, I have not written any Star Wars fan fiction, but I imagine if I was trying to put myself in Obi-Wan's shoes, I would sound more stoic than this, but that's all entirely up to, writer's prerogative.
That's true. There is some narrator voice there, isn't there?
Yeah.
All right, so I should probably switch on to my next one.
Oh yes, feel free.
Okay. Which one is this? Hold on. I have them all in one document, and I didn't put them in any particular order. So, you can find this. Okay. Star Wars fanfiction number 2. Everything hurt, and it is impossible to ignore that fact. Luke felt his life fleeting and fading, but saved. He was saved. He didn't really believe what he had said. He did think his father still had good left in him, that much is true, but he didn't know he could bring it out. But now that he had been proven right beyond his wildest dreams, the man seems impossible to save. His life support faded with the shorting out of the armored suit he wears, and without the mask, the burned and scarred face of Anakin Skywalker inches closer and closer to death by the second. It seems almost foolish and naive to think he can get the man to a medic, or a mechanic? He wonders which one the cyborg needs. It's so unclear with the man being somewhere around half robotics. Something inclines him to try anyway. He doesn't know what direction a medic would be, but he tries to pull the body in some way. He regrets removing the mask to see the human underneath. He could have given his father the precious seconds he needs to live. The ground is littered with the aftermath of a battlefield. Something feels off, but he can hardly think straight. He just needs to find help. Somebody, anybody, to help would be worth it. He hears a voice and tries to listen. He can feel the life draining from his father, who weighs heavily in his arms. Hello, are you all right? He doesn't know if he answers, but it's hard to focus on anything. Something like a small voice in the back of his mind says to look up and see who's speaking. The voice says something else. Something about Jedi? The owner is a tall man. Two-tone hair with honey blonde roots peeking through dark brown locks. The man dresses in dark clothing. If not for the maroon sleeves and his relatively fair skin, Luke would easily think he's talking to a shadow. Maybe he is. We have medics on staff if you have any injuries, the man promises. Though Luke isn't sure what those words are preceded by, it doesn't matter what he said first. He mentioned medics. Luke doesn't need a medic, or maybe he does, but his father, he needs a medic. He's dying. His breathing is steadying to a halt. Luke tries to speak, making a noise as he tries to say he's dying, but words don't come out. The stranger kneels by him, inspecting Vader with bright blue eyes that look so strangely familiar to something in the back of Luke's mind. Okay, thoughts? Guys? Did you
Um,
die?
no, I was just very like engrossed by it. It's actually like a really good introduction.
Yes, I, you know, us. So obviously, this is giving us, um, our action and our more specifically our divergence from canon, uh, very fairly quickly.
It is.
We start out with canon, and then it's pretty clear that something has happened.
Something has happened.
And I have like a seed of an idea of what's happening, but not why. Which is cool. I mean, there's a lot of intrigue here. I don't know like what exactly to expect, or I should say, I am looking forward to getting clarification on what the fuck is going on. So mission accomplished. And,
Woo!
I don't know what else to say about this. Just that like, I feel like this author really like did a good job of putting me in what feels very much like Luke Skywalker's head, as opposed to, Obi-Wan was the narrative. Like I am more what's the word? Damn it! I feel more in the moment here. Like I am along for the ride.
Okay. Saul, what are your thoughts?
Very similar.
Anything about Star Wars?
I mean, you're gonna keep making fun of me for that. I see how it is.
It has become a bit of a hyperfixation. This is why I write about mental illness, because this is the epitome of mental illness, a love of Star Wars. Anyway, continue. What are your thoughts?
So being that I don't know like jack shit about Star Wars, I can just give like an unbiased opinion on this as an introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's super intriguing right off the bat because like you're starting a story with clearly like a complicated familial relationship, and like obviously I know who the characters are. I'm not an idiot, but opening with like the death of like an estranged father, like it's a very good way to get us in the scene as readers and also kind of give us enough information so we kind of have an idea of where this could be going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess this is the part where I reveal which one's which.
No, we have to guess, remember?
Oh yeah, you have to guess. Which one do you think's which?
I think the first one is one that you wrote, and I think that the second one is one that Stranicel wrote.
Okay. Okay, what do you think, DJ?
I was gonna say the opposite. I think this is Mary because I don't know a lot about the story Mary is planning, but I know that it centers heavily on a couple of particular characters, who are very much in focus here, and it just, I don't know, it like this seems like the kind of thing that you would do because you like to get into moments of trauma and be like, now let's tinker with this.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so DJ's right. The first one that I read was the intro to Don't Be a Stranger by Strancel off of Archive of Our Own. And I
Oh my
chose that
god, I
one
did get them mixed up.
because I was like, these are both kind of crack concepts taken seriously. Strancel wrote and like in the tags of crack taken seriously, was like, hey, so you know how in the Raka Hardin arc, there is revealed to be technology that can completely alter your face to look like somebody else. So what if Chancellor Palpatine, after being rescued, was like, hey, you know how to fuck up Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship even more than like before? You kidnap Obi-Wan and you disguise somebody else as him. So that's Don't Be a Stranger. It's focused on the Anakin Obi-Wan dynamic directly following the Racco Hardeen incident. And then the other one doesn't really have a name as of right now, but it's also kind of crack taken seriously. It is it's a time travel fix-it fic. Also doubling as an what if Anakin got therapy fic.
So can I ask something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know you're gonna say this anyway, but the blonde-haired, blue-eyed person we meet at the end is Anakin, right? Young
It
Anakin.
is. It's Anakin Skywalker. It's just that in Clone Wars he has brown hair for some reason, and we joked internally that he definitely dyes it, so the dye's fading out. Why he has dark brown hair with like pretty blonde pretty blonde roots.
Yep.
And it is also incidentally set right after the Racco Hardeen incident because we thought it'd be pretty. We were like, what if, like, during the Clone Wars, not at the end, but where Anakin's at peak Darksider? When he and Obi-Wan are working together right after Obi-Wan fakes his death and Anakin's being Anakin about the whole thing, you know, being petty and grumpy and passive-aggressive. And I actually originally wrote this from Anakin's perspective. So I have, like, another version that is, like, looking at the other side of the scene, which is Luke and Vader are pulled back in time. But where Anakin's at and where he finds them is in a battle scene recovery. And like what's going through his brain is, there really are survivors? I don't want to play Jedi right now. And so nothing he's saying is genuine. He's just being petty and mean. Anyways. Yeah. So they're both kind of Star Wars crack taken seriously fan fiction.
Okay, well, I'm excited now.
Props to DJ for catching it, for knowing who wrote what, and also for saying that I am better at character voice than one of my favorite fanfiction authors.
I mean, you are really good at character voice. The main reason why I thought that the first one was yours is because I know you are specifically, like, hyper-fixated on the Obi-Wan Anakin dynamic, so I was just kind of like...
Oh, yeah, I will make no secret of the fact that I love them.
Yeah, so that was where my thought process went, and I'm like, well, it's focusing on those two characters, so I'm just going to guess it's that.
I basically never mentioned Luke, so I did like pull in a Luke as the vocal character.
Yeah, that's actually why I was like,
most of what I do is Clone Wars and prequels.
It's like, it sounds like Mary's writing, but I've never seen her write about Luke before, so...
Yeah, I must have seen a snippet from this story somewhere because, like, I had it in my mind like Mary likes the Luke Anakin thing.
I post screenshots of it sometimes, like of the original roleplay, because I do sometimes will have like a moment that I'm like, oh gosh, I need to share this.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I got that mixed up.
Oh, please don't apologize. You did mix up my writing with somebody who I really respect as a writer, so, y'all were both right.
Alright.
Y'all both help my self-esteem. Okay, DJ, your turn.
Glad to be of service. Okay, yeah. I got my two things lined up here. Inspiration can be hard to find for a woman like me, but it's not without trying. When I look out the window of my modest Brooklyn apartment, I see that the world happening all around me is beautiful and strange and special, but for some reason that just won't translate into excitement. I'm a wizard by trade, and you'd think that means I can cast any spell I want, but unfortunately that's not the case. I need to be excited about something if I'm gonna put my wand in the air. It's always been this way, and between you and me, I'd call this my secret weapon. This is how I managed to develop a full-fledged wizarding career without any previous experience experience in the spells and magic industry, how my first spell, Bubbless Morphus, managed to explode into a viral sensation the likes of which nobody has ever seen. Sure, it was nothing more than a simple collection of magical bubbles containing various scenes from the caster's life, but it was easy to personalize and the scroll soon went viral. I'm proud of that spell. I only spellcraft when I'm passionate to spellcraft, and because of that, I can only create magical effects with true, breathtaking, potent, bleeding, honest heart and soul. Then again, since graduating wizard school, I've only published one hit spell. I've been sitting here and staring out the window of my apartment for days now, my eyes following the men in suits on their way to work, the young guys playing basketball in the park across the street, and the woman shouting into a megaphone on the corner. They've all got their own important stories to tell, and I know this, but they aren't my story. That's what a hit spell does. Tells a good story about the wizard who crafted it. Alright, end scene.
Okay, so I have to already say, like, upon opening, I love how casually it just like brings you into the world. Like, it's just like, yeah, I'm a wizard. Like, that's a casual, like, just a career path that you just pick.
Yes. It's urban fantasy, and that particular stripe of urban fantasy where it's like literally in the city. And I tend to like that kind of stuff.
It tells you a lot about the setting, yeah.
Very fun. It tells you a lot about the setting. And then, like, our protagonist, who I kind of already like, is like just having your normal deconstructing their career path, but like in their career path as wizard.
Yes. It's like a very 20s and 30s kind of lament to have, but about wizarding.
So I kind of like that. Like, it just pulls you in. It's like, hey, this world is a lot like your own world, and like immediately throws relatability points at your character. So yeah, that's my thoughts as an intro. Like, I kind of feel like this is opening into a story that's going to be about self-discovery, or reaffirming of one's identity.
It also walks this very good line too of like letting us see into the character's like thoughts without that being the sole focus, because we still kind of see the world around her as she's lamenting, and I appreciate that.
Yes. Alright, should I go into the next one then? Your thoughts, Saul?
I'm pretty much solid. I think that it definitely is very like postmodern urban fantasy, but I do like it.
On to the next one?
Yes. I need a swig of something. Justice Naveri Jamis was a hard-faced, middle-aged elf, with skin more like a young willow or birch than the grizzled old oak bark of truly old Metlani. Of course, when he scowled, it seemed to age him instantly. His nose and upper mouth crinkled, furrowed brows dulled the piercing gaze of his silvery blue eyes, and his upthrust ears folded inward a bit, creating the impression not just of an oak tree, but one with bracket mushrooms growing off the stumps of dead branches. He was scowling now as he tried to reconstruct the scene of the crime. It was a tableau of individually familiar elements. The mid-afternoon sun shone down on the blonde grass of the Patapam highlands. The wood-paneled carriage lying overturned there bore the livery of the High Court and was usually stationed just outside the constabulary in Emeryville. The horses were gone, but 3 men, 2 human and 1 elf, were going nowhere as they lay dead on the field. He could see bits and pieces of it in his mind's eye. The carriage had been running behind schedule and was still a good 10 kilometers short of its overnight stop in Denthrop when something had given it chase. Something, because he had no idea what was capable of leaving such massive bite and claw marks. It had managed to knock it onto one side, at which point the driver, a stocky human, Deputy Krantz, had taken cover and fought back with his crossbow. Seemingly, it was also at this point the horses had been liberated. And well that they had, their swift return to town had triggered an immediate search of the area. However, it had done nothing to distract the monster, and Krantz had been yanked from the wreck quite forcefully, dislocating his shoulder and leaving bite marks that made Jameis think first of a tigrin, though that was nonsensical here in the Highlands. The cause of death could have been that bite alone. However, a gray sheen to the man's skin, and the absence of any of the usual quick-responding carrion bugs, clarified that this was no regular animal mauling. No, Krantz had died of the touch. "Necri," he said, and spat in the grass. 10 paces away, off to the right of the wreck, Deputy Samin's lithe form lay on its side, torso drenched in blood. Whatever had gotten Krantz, Samin had managed to hold it at bay. Scorch marks radiating away from his position indicated he had defended himself with fire spells, and his right hand still clutched a polearm whose veil steel tip was darkened by blood. No bite marks, no sign of the touch. What had done him in was a stab wound in his left side just below the ribcage. Samin's own dagger lay bloodied and discarded next to the carriage. So, he had tried to defend the prisoner, and for it he'd been repaid with a knife in the back. These cultists were getting worse all the time.
And scene?
So, that was much darker.
It's a different tone, a different genre.
It
Yeah.
definitely would keep me reading. It does a good job of like
I was just like, wait, is there more?
it's one of those stories where it starts off and it's like, here's your main conflict. We don't have a direct antagonist, but you know this ties directly to your antagonist. Go. And like, I'm here for it.
It kind of reads to me like this is like a detective scene, but it's like a fantasy detective scene. Like, it feels like fantasy Sherlock Holmes-ish.
Yeah, sort of a wizard police procedural vibe.
Yeah. And I'm here for it, honestly. I'd keep reading. Like, you're already in with, like, this, like... It's kind of already, like, intriguing, you know?
Yeah, any other thoughts, Saul?
I think I know what this is from, so I'm trying to hold my tongue a little bit.
Okay.
But I do appreciate just like all the little details that the author tossed in, because from this intro alone I can easily pick up like what kind of world this probably takes place in, what the main conflict is, that there's going to be like bits of conlang, and like that it's going to be some sword and sorcery-esque thing to deal with whatever this problem is.
Yep. All right. Shall we guess?
Okay.
Okay, I'll let Mary guess first.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
guess that you wrote the first one, and somebody else wrote the second, because the first one is kind of like this like fun conversational thing that feels like it's gonna be about self-actualization, and I know that's something that you would like to write.
All right, Saul.
I think that the first one is from an author that you like. It might even be from like Cory Doctorow, if I'm saying his name right. I might be fucking that up. And the second I am good. And the second one is definitely yours, and I am like 99.8% sure it's the intro of House of Ill Repute.
Yeah, that's right. So, the first one is actually from a novella called, oh god. If I could say this all in one breath. It's from Harriet Porber and the Bad Boy Parasaurolophus, which is a wizard and dinosaur uh, fantasy smut written by Chuck Tingle.
Of course, Chuck Tingle. I knew you were gonna throw one of them in
I
here.
see what threw me because yes, it is about a trans person self-actualizing and on a journey of discovery, basically, which does bear some similarities to Sheldon Saga. Yeah, I read a few of his things and I really liked this for a multitude of reasons. One, it's the whole book is a giant fuck you to Joe Rowling, and two, it's it's a great example of just like throwing you into a world where everything's weird and everything is also queer, and it's just like you roll with it.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of this that you definitely get some people being petty bitches in the story, but you also get a lot of queerness being normalized, which is cool. And yeah, so the other one is the intro to House of Ill Repute, which there's actually like there's a big gap in the story where I'm trying to figure out what goes between this and the rest of the chapters I have, but I knew I wanted it to start here, and I decided to play kind of with that police procedural type thing.
It was very, very good. I did kind of get lost in your intro, so I'll be totally honest. I was just like, wow. Like, it was gripping.
Awesome.
I mean, almost every like piece that he has shared from House of Ill Repute is pretty gripping, so throwing that out there.
Yeah, I gotta get that one polished up. I'm very pleased with how it's been.
Oh shit, it's my turn, isn't it?
It is. It's Saul's turn.
Baby, I need to trim your claws, don't I?
I'm going to quickly zoom out of my artwork so that viewers have something to kind of look at. Alright, so I'm just gonna read one, let you dissect it, keep my mouth shut, read the second, and then we'll do the same thing.
Alright.
The angel stretched his wings as he sat atop the church. The humans filing in at the break of dawn were none the wiser, regardless of how much they liked to think they understood. The small family, especially that crossed the threshold last, was particularly ignorant. The angel Umable paused. He nearly overlooked it, but such a small human was usually no more than an ant to his kind. He appeared among them with curly blonde hair glistening in the sunlight, and his blue eyes expanded as he followed the trio into the old building. It stunk of moldy wood and sin, and he could feel the hypocrisy dripping off the man who called himself a prophet, a pastor, that joined the family in question. He was tall and handsome in a brown suit, and his wife stood obediently at his side in a skirt and a sweater. They all seemed to know each other. The pastor smiled at the child, and Mabel zeroed in. I'm so happy to see you with us this morning. The pastor held out a hand, and the child shook it loosely. Will you be joining us for service after Sunday school? Okay, that's the first one. So you two can kind of say your thoughts, and I'll be quiet for now.
That was very. That was It was very short.
The book has large text.
So, we meet our characters. It feels kind of somber. Like,
That's pretty accurate, honestly, considering like the whole story.
Yeah, I get the sense that this is a world that has a fair amount of darkness in it because right away, like, you have, the angel is passing judgment on this person and this person, and like, not in the sense that he seems overly harsh, more in the sense that like, you just know that, well, the religious institutions of this world have the same kind of problems as a lot of real world ones. Like, when I, as he's introducing the family and the pastor, I immediately thought of um, a thing I recently watched about the Dogger family, and just more generally uh, about stories about you know religious fundamentalist hypocrisy.
Yeah,
But I'm
no,
not sure.
you're hitting the
For
nail
sure
on the
whether.
head.
But I
Hmm?
couldn't say for sure whether it is yours or someone else's. I'm not familiar with it, but it could be.
It's not out of character for me to talk about this stuff.
Yes.
It feels like it is a. Yeah, I'm just gonna second what DJ said.
You want me to move on to the second one?
Yes.
Okay. So on to the second one now. You step into a field. Grass tickles your feet. The blue sky smiles down on you. You look up at the bright sun, your life, your regrets at your back. Your wrinkled toes and fingers look all the same, but there's no pain as you walk and move freely. All colors of Fae fly around you, glitter trailing behind them, streaking the sky with baby blues, baby pinks, and silver. Across the blue-green dancing grass, you see a bunny with the mane of a lion. Somehow you know her name as Lenny. She proudly rubs her gel paws through her hair, forming it into large spikes. Her grin grows with each adjustment of her new punk look. Slithering towards her comes her friend, Snitty, a snake with the head of a kitty. Snitty scowls at her friend. That looks awful, Snitty shouts. Lenny shakes her head. I like it, she continues with her hair. You approach absent-mindedly. As you do, Snitty slithers to you desperately. Please tell her it looks bad, the snake kitty pleads. You kneel down and pet Snitty's head. You smile. If she wants to look different, that's okay. It's okay if you don't think it looks good. But you should still be nice to your friend. It makes her happy, see? You gently turn Snitty's head to face her friend. Lenny hums and grins as she looks at her reflection in a pond. You're right, Snitty pouts. I'm sorry, Lenny. It makes you happy. That's all that matters. Lenny hugs her friend and they play in the field, chasing each other, hide and go seek, then tag. You smile as you brush your white hair from your face and adjust your bun. It's time to continue to the forest beyond this meadow. End scene.
That was kind of trippy to listen to.
You could read the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Very, very unused to, you know, second person. That's what that is.
Yeah, it's second person. It's second person present, actually.
Told,
Yes.
it's told kind of like it feels kind of like not like a fairy tale, but like a folk tale, where it's like, oh, these are your kind of weird magical creatures. They have names. They're doing things, and then there's like little lesson, and then they're like, oh yeah, we understand the lesson.
Right.
It feels like it feels almost like a campfire story, but like in second person present.
Yes, which gives it sort of a like a cinematic or a I don't know like a beat poetry kind of feel.
I mean, someone could probably read this out loud at like a live poetry thing. I feel like it would be a story for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Um, I realized I am not without some insider information.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. I will say, um, it's very different from a lot of what I read. It's this is a story for adults. I would say that, but very much centers childlike ideas and whimsical, sort of a whimsical backdrop where all the creatures are like some kind of mashup of two other animals, kind of thing, and it's I think that's really cool because it's like literally we need to think more like the children do.
You have too much insider information, but yes,
Yes, I
that's
do.
it.
Way too much.
I think that I might know what this is now because while I haven't read it, I have heard you guys talking about it.
Oh my god. See, this is why I said it was going to be too easy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't figure out what to say about it without saying something.
It's okay. I can give you the deets and then you can discuss things more in depth. So the first one is from a book that I've read and I wrote an entire thread in our server on it and I obsessed over it. It's Everything is Wonderful Now by Shane Blackheart. It's an amazing book. I highly recommend it. It's like a fictionalized autobiography and it's very much about like religious trauma and like how that affects this main character who is a transgender man, but obviously you start the story from when like he's a child, so the story's about a little girl who grows up to be a man dealing with religious trauma, and it's very good, and I want everyone to know to read it.
Interesting. So the angel is not actually like one of the main characters. This is just a device.
The angel is a very important character in the story, but like I don't want to give too much away if you decide to read it. I will say that that angel is a very antagonistic character.
Okay. Yeah. Beginning. So, you know, not knowing anything else about it, it definitely it reminds me of your sort of work. It does.
Yeah, which is
Yeah,
probably why I like
very
it
much
so
the
much.
kind of thing you like.
It's
I bet that the other one is the lessons you learn as a child are
Regress with the something something as an adult.
the the title of the second one, and I'm not even looking at it when I'm saying this. I have this title memorized, believe it or not. It is The Lessons You Hold as a Child Regress with the Ignorance You Learn as an Adult.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And the wording is important because like the idea is that the lessons you hold, they're like inherent, you know these things. Like each child is inherently kind of born, not like born, but like they all kind of have this like we just want to be friends and accept each other kind of mentality. But it's as you get older you learn that kind of ignorance from the world around you.
Yeah, like the POV character has, is told as though they also have some acquired wisdom and like, the vocabulary of an adult, but what they're expressing is very much the child's perspective.
It's what I was going for. So it's a short story that I wrote. Surprise, I wrote it. Um, the main character is an old woman who's passed away, and she's kind of going through like this purgatory where she's reflecting upon her own life, and like the distance that she has with her child, who is a transgender man, which you find out through the like flashbacks, and she was very like bigoted towards her son and then he distanced himself from her, and the whole story is kind of about like the pain that this caused both of them, but the core of the story and the way it's framed is it's having these moments in this very like whimsical purgatory setting where she's expressing her like innermost like the most inherent sort of like I just want to be good to people attitude that like I think we all deep down have. And she's expressing that, but then it's flashing back to a parallel scene where she does the opposite with her own child.
Okay.
Yeah. Like if I read if sorry, you
Sorry.
can speak.
I was just gonna say it's a beautiful story and it's also kind of emotionally brutal.
Yeah, I broke a few people with this one because I kind of just made them read it with no context.
Why would you do that?
I don't know. It was interesting to see the reactions to it because like I don't even know if I ever saw DJ's initial reaction. A few others told me that like it made them start crying, and then I remember when Jack read it, he just wrote it's quite poignant like 6 times before he said any actual thoughts on it. So like it's it's a weird fucking story.
Yeah,
I think
it's
it has a really strong intro that's like automatically just like breaking your standard writing conventions, and I think that's fun.
The story has it was kind of a challenge as well as like me wanting to talk about this stuff in a way that I'd never see it talked about, because people will write about like bigotry as if it's like an external problem, if that makes sense. Like you'll have people that write their like fantasy settings and they add some kind of like racism, but they don't write about it the way that like that actually functions in reality, right? Because like any form of bigotry is inherently such a human problem because it's a thing that humans do to each other. And I rarely see it discussed from this point of view where you see someone dissecting their own prejudices, just kind of showing that like one, you can probably relate to this person, but two, this person is also insanely bigoted, but also they're human. And I'm not trying to like say that acting that way is okay. I'm trying to say that like it's important to recognize these issues as human issues, because then you can actually tackle them in a way where you're doing something and you're not just vilifying it as this like thing. Like if you treat like transphobia, for example, because it's kind of what this one's about, like it's just people shouting and misgendering and like punching people, you're not going to get to the core of it because it's actually much more insidious than that.
Yeah.
And that was part of it. The other part was the I don't know what writing conventions are. I like to mess things up. So this story has second person present scenes, and that's when we're in the woman's perspective when after she's died. And then the flashbacks are in like third person past tense. And then there's like a scene at the very end in first person present when she like self actualizes, because she's kind of like the idea is that it's second person because I want you the reader to put yourself in her shoes, but then as she self actualizes at the end, she's connected to the mistakes that she's made and realized that she needs to become a better person, even if it is too little too late.
yeah, and that device that like it'll confuse you when you see it, like when the perspective switches the first time, but like very quickly you get the idea, and I think it's very effective.
It's also really short. I think it's like 3,000 words.
Yeah, it is short.
I don't really write super long stories. I don't know how to do that, so
So, what was everyone's favorite? Favorite intro that we've covered in all two episodes.
for all two, I'm just gonna give favorites from this one because you can't do this to me. And it's just going to sound like I'm praising you two, but I like the ones that you two wrote especially.
I like uh actually I like yours, Saul, and I also like the one that you read, the sample that you gave us from Everything Is Wonderful Now.
Oh yeah, I really recommend that book.
So, I'm gonna copy Saul and be like, it's gonna sound like I'm just praising you two, but my favorite from this episode were the two that you wrote. So,
See, I knew you.
I did predict last time we met that actually, like, I hadn't really thought about the ordering, but I then predicted that this was the strongest of the three stronger of the two that I wrote myself.
Yeah, like I honestly think that Tavoa is probably a stronger opening technically uh than this short story is.
I think that this short
But
story has like such an interesting opening. Like it's just like it's automatically just making you question things, and I think that's like really fun.
Yeah, it's very different from the get-go.
Like
well,
it's already just taking your average reader out of their comfort zone, like right off the bat.
I
Yeah,
mean
you
the
can
whole
devour
point
that
is to
story
be
before you even realize you're
yeah.
uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, you're supposed to be uncomfortable. That's the whole point of that story.
But like by the time you realize you're uncomfortable, you're already like, "Oh, I ate it," and it's going down awkwardly.
Yeah.
So I think that now would be like a really good time for us to kind of discuss, like, in tandem with everything that we've read, like what an opening is supposed to do and what it can do and how it can succeed, because like every time you watch, like if you go on YouTube and you look up like how to write an intro, you're gonna get like Jenna Marassi's, video come up, right? And it's gonna give you the same basic tips that everyone on AuthorTube gives you, and it's basically like introduce your main character, introduce your antagonist, establish normalcy, like the most bare bones basic tips. But it's really hard to work off of that in terms of actual writing advice, because what you're writing might not conventionally fall into that. Also, hello, hi. I'm gonna also say hi. We have a viewer. you
Hi,
you
viewer.
you come right when we're actually wrapping up. I'm so sorry, but we're not done yet. But yeah, like I feel like writing intros are just, they're more complicated than people make them out to be, because if you're writing like a contemporary romance with like a jealous ex as the villain, yeah, you can easily introduce jealous ex villain, introduce your love interests, and introduce your basic normalcy setting, and you can pretty much leave it at that, and you have this go like easy start, right? But if you're writing a introspective story about mental health and like how PTSD has ruined this person's life, your intro has to be much different, because your antagonist isn't a person, it's a condition. And then you have to frame everything around like what you're trying to tell. So I'm gonna stop rambling. I think that we should go in a circle and kind of discuss our thoughts about like how to open a story broadly based off of what type of story you might be writing.
Sure. Um, I'll start. In thinking about this and reading these openings together, the thing that occurs to me, first of all, what can a story introduction be is such a fun question because the answer is, you know, fucking anything. There are so many different ways to approach it that are equally valid. And I think there are two general strategies that I have seen, and this cuts across genre lines, and I'm generalizing a little, but sort of two styles of introductions, or maybe two very loose categorizations of introductions. One is a well executed example, of the the pattern and the shape of the genre you're writing in. It's unique to you, but it is working in the scope of this is, this is what a detective story beginning looks like, or this is what an epic fantasy beginning might look like. And then there are story openings that unabashedly show you the author's face. And also a very valid and potentially very successful strategy. Like I guess in the latter category, I would say more is the Cory Doctorow intro, for instance. And I of the stories that I've written, I probably try to do that more with Sheldon Saga. With House of Ill Repute, I became enamored with this idea of let's do a fucking police procedural opening, because there is a cult investigation that underlies the plot. So it does fit, even though this is more broadly just low fantasy. Or medium fantasy, I guess. And
We need to make an episode on discussing medium, high, and low fantasy, by the way. But anyway, continue.
yeah, no, I always stumble into that because that story is weird. It feels contemporary, but you could argue HOIR is high fantasy. Anyway, the point being is I like that there are different approaches that people take.
So
I think that's a good answer.
I'm gonna guess that you're done talking, just because had
Yes,
a little
sorry. Please,
quiet.
go ahead.
Okay, so my take on a good opening and what makes a good opening is I just kind of want to know the tone of the story. And like I think that's the most important thing. Is that like I feel like so calling back to the last episode that we did, my other opening, you know, the one good thing I wrote in my entire life. I think that that is the most extreme version of the setting of my story. And I think that that is kind of an important thing to do in an opening, but not in every opening. But I think that a lot of openings should have the most extreme aspect of your story just kind of thrown into the audience's face, so that they are like, yeah, that's what I expect. Especially if like your opening is something that's like really gritty, and then you like if you have like a soft opening that's something that's like super duper gritty, and then move on into something much more tame and temperate and cool and like calm, then the reader won't be caught off guard when something, you know, bonkers happens.
I do want to cut in briefly, but you can continue after this. There is this like syndrome in stories that you gotta kind of be aware of, and this is something that got beaten into me with a stick at university when I was taking writing classes. I know, but if you have a very exciting introduction, you gotta be careful not to slow it down too much after that introduction, because if you have a book where it's like um it's a fight scene in the opening. Like, imagine the opening of Tavoa. Raylan walks in, he sees Felix being killed, and he tries to save the squirrel, and he kills these two cruel men. And imagine if, right after that intro, for the next, like, I would say give it, you know, like 5,000 words. It's just Raylan meandering and having, like, a slice of life time working at a tavern. And I don't go into anything else. You kind of see the issue with that tonally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not what I meant.
No, I know. I just want to make sure that like we're on the same page. Like you can kind of slow down after a fast intro, but you got to keep a similar enough tone that like
Yeah, because like your intro needs to be giving you an actual like introduction on what's going on in the story. Like the next thing after my Cuphead fanfiction intro, after we have the whole like losing his brother thing, we then move on to the droning of 5 years later, what it's like to work in freaking a cafe. So I do kind of do that, but like I don't think that I get rid of the stakes of everything sucks and life is miserable. I don't think I get like, I don't know. I kind of like it when something is like, it starts off really intense and then it holds some of that tension, but not that pace. But I also like slow burn things, so.
Yes. But from what I've seen of your story, in general, that's like, you don't go too far of seeing, you know, cutesy things that could be confused for a slice of life without an introspective moment of Cuphead being like, fuck, I gotta, you know, get back on track.
Like, this is, I'm wasting my time!
You know, or, you know, moping about, you know, the shitty things.
It does feel like he's wasting time and moping and being just, oh, Bibi! Please stop getting under my feet! This was your own fault! Sorry, my dog is being dumb.
but yeah, no, like you you have a good thing going with your pacing. I wasn't critiquing you really, just more like giving a forewarning, you know.
Yeah. But like I feel like your introduction should be like it should introduce at least one of the most extreme elements of your story. Like
I have thoughts on that, but I'll wait till you're done.
I feel like it should tell you this is what to expect. And then, like, because, like, another thing, like, as you said, if you go into an intro and then you have, like, this high-stakes action, and then you never see that high-stakes action again, you've got, even if it was a really well-written action scene, it's a pretty bad intro.
Nope, that's an accurate statement.
Yeah.
It's
I
like,
have this...
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go on.
I have this outline. It's a fairly loose outline for the missing chapters from House of Ill Repute. And, they have big shoes to fill, but they... I think they meet this pattern in the sense that, in the introduction and the couple of pages afterwards, we get establishment that someone very evil and very cruel is going around doing shit behind the scenes in the kingdom of Matlan, and it's supposed to then cut to this bumbling group of adventurers being given the assignment by people who think it is a goose chase that will a goose chase of no importance, and them struggling to cohere as a group, which then allows them to actually be the fucking awesome versions of themselves in the second half of the story. And I think it will be slow at times, but the what I'm aiming for is, in general, you'll get recurring glimpses of, like, no one's willing to admit it, but something is extremely fucking fishy in Freetown. Something seems like way out of our league, and that should preface the fairly epic conclusion, if I do say so myself.
Bitch, please stop it. I'm trying to do a podcast.
As we say, planting seeds. So yeah, that's a good idea.
That's the aim.
I have like a TED talk ready, but I'm just kind of waiting for you guys to finish up.
Okay, I think I've said my piece. So.
Okay. So to clarify, I'm probably gonna sound like the most fucking pragmatic asshole, maybe a little pretentious. Just gonna zoom out on the character art here.
Pragmatic and pedantic.
I am both. I am the most evil, the worst, if you will. But anyway, the my like theory about introductions to stories, and it's kind of the same thing about like titling and like marketing, like your front face for your story, which is kind of all of those things, like cover art, all that junk, is you have to look at the story as a whole, and you have to kind of figure out like two things. You have to figure out what the most climactic moment of the story is, and then you have to figure out what it is the story is kind of saying. Even if you didn't write it with a thematic thing in mind, you should still kind of be able to like pick apart your work and be like, oh, I have like my work is kind of saying this thing, as well as obviously knowing where the climax of your story is. And you can kind of take both of those things and you can use them interchangeably for things like cover art, for planting your seeds, for your title, for how you intro the story, for how you write the intro. So like if I break down Tavoa, the story obviously is about this character coming to terms with his trauma and fighting for his freedom, and the biggest, most climactic moment in the story is when he breaks his shackles and he goes to fight Lima. And I have to kind of look at all of those things, and the title is an extension of the theme, and the intro is an extension of what I'm building up to. Because I'm not really introducing Lima just to show the antagonist. I'm introducing the antagonistic force being his past, his trauma, and then the climax is him confronting it. And that's kind of like my theory on a good intro, is that when you do get to the end and the story wraps together, you have this oh moment, like the title and like the intro and everything just like files into place.
I feel like that could be really useful if you're a planner.
Yes.
As somebody who cannot plan things worth anything, I'm like, wow. Imagine knowing how the story's gonna end when you start writing it.
I will say, if you don't fully have a planned outline, like, I plan stories to the point where it's kind of insane, actually. But even if you're not quite, I know. Don't look at my planning documents. They're too much.
Planning documents, what are those? I write things and then I organize them in hindsight.
But what I'm saying is that you don't necessarily need to have like all that planning written out to follow this method. You just have to have a loose idea of how you want your story to go, a loose idea of what the climax is, and a loose idea of what you're saying thematically. You don't need to have like a strict plan to do this exact same thing. Like if you know that you want the climax of your Cuphead story to be a specific scene, like you have that in mind, and you know that you're kind of talking about these, overarching themes and topics with the story, you can still incorporate that into the intro, into your like foreshadowing, and into your like titling and everything. So
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So now I'm trying to think how I would apply this, because I did plan House of Ill Repute out rather in detail, because once I started writing stories, like writing things in that universe, I realized quickly this had a sort of a Tolkien vibe. Well, it's in that, in that definitely epic side of middle to high fantasy, and I needed to know what the fuck had happened in the past, and what the stakes were. Uh, in terms of this part, in terms of just what's in the novella, what is the message? I guess the message of House of Ill Repute is don't underestimate working class heroes. In a long story short, well, working class heroes and sex workers. And the climax is, obviously you've seen bits and pieces of it. It's when that whole thing goes crashing down.
Of course.
As I refer to it as the tactical nuke. And and in that sense, what is my intro even doing? I don't know. It's like I'm mainly trying to establish that they're very evil people, and that they're under the radar.
I also want to quick clarify that, like, if you've written an intro and you later finish your story, plan it out more, and you decide, like, that there's another way you could introduce a story that would play better into how you want to kind of wrap everything up, you can just rewrite the intro.
Yeah.
And like that's fine. You don't have to stick with the original draft. Like I outline things, but then I fuck with the outline, and then I rewrite it, and then I like add scenes in to make things make more sense, and like I mess with things a lot before I'm fully satisfied with it. It's like Play-Doh until you finally decide it's done. And up until that point it's still Play-Doh. So you can change whatever you need to make it work.
Yeah, I do a fair amount of retooling. The original beginning of House of Ill Repute was very unlike that. It was completely in medias res. It's Madame Greenleaf walking down a hallway. She's pissed off because something has ruined her day, and the something is Tobin crashing through a roof.
I remember you sharing that, actually.
She's
Yeah.
like, "You owe me money for this damage. What the fuck is wrong with you?"
That also
Yeah.
sounds like a pretty great intro, honestly.
And like I want to be
Yeah.
clear, I think that all of like the intros themselves as intros were fantastic. So I'm not even like saying um that your ideas are terrible and blah, blah, blah. I'm just talking about the long game, you know?
Yes, the long game.
But yeah, my I still think that intro should still tell you what. I think at the end of the day, the intro should tell you what story you're reading.
I think that following my method that I have outlined in this TED Talk will actually accomplish that goal inherently, because like if your intro is already playing into the theme of your story and building up to the climax just super preemptively and planting all the seeds that it can possibly plant while still feeling natural in tune with how you want to start your story, it's going to be playing into the tone and like the characters and what you're going to get out of the story. So like your reader should be able to read your first chapter and already know like kind of what they're in for, and that's an incredibly strong way to open a book. So
Yeah, it's hard to
and that
make, you know, hard to make hard fast statements, but in general, I agree. Like a good intro, typically I'm gonna get a glimpse of, you know, what might be the trajectory of the story, um, the a sense of the tone, how light or dark is this world, sort of the envelope of things, how high or how low we're gonna go.
exactly, and I think that like buying this method for three payments of 19.99. uh I'm so sorry I'm being such an asshole, but it like I had a thought.
I
um
think my dog is really interested in your thought. He keeps trying to steal my phone.
but basically it should like work for any kind of story that you're trying to tell, because if you're trying to tell like a mystery story, inherently it's going to have to play into the mystery because that's what the climax is going to be focused on. If you're writing, you know, uh, a dark fantasy action story, it's going to have to play into that nature of the story. And if you're writing like what Mary writes, like mental health, messed up characters unpacking their trauma, it's going to have to play into that too, in the exact same vein. So, like, following this one method, your intros aren't going to be identical. You're not just going to have a slew of, first chapters that all follow the same basic rules that you can find in any Jenna Morassi copycat video, because those videos operate off of what is popular in literature right now and not what works for storytelling overall as an art form. Am I
So I
being a
have
little bit cynical? Yes, I'm being very cynical.
I mean, I
so
like that the answer is focus on sort of the level of craft, the the bigger picture of the structure of the story. I do like that.
That's always my aim. At least my aim with writing is I want to focus on the art form. I want to give you something that you can like bite and chew, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mary, you were going to say something?
Right. So, what if you're the sort of person who what if your story requires like multiple intros because it has alternating point of view characters and alternating and more than one climax? Do you
So
have to do that with every single one?
so I wrote a story that actually falls into that category that DJ has read that I've been avoiding talking about because it's very dark. But but I should
Yes.
talk about it now because it does fall into this. So the Frost that Killed the Flower is Glacé's introduction. It's his part one of three story, and it's posted online for free if you want to read it. Like it's there. Just be warned, it's a little fucked up. But
It's fun.
anyway, yeah. But the way the story works is you start off with. I'm just gonna content warning for things like sexual assault because I'm gonna get into that discussion a little bit here. But you start off with Glacé in Kekovla and Svetvian in like modern, timeline. He's an adult now, young adult, somewhere in his early to mid 20s. And the scene throws you into a very uncomfortable sex scene where he's being like misgendered and clearly he's not enjoying it and he's kind of being taken advantage of because he's he's not estranged, but he's lost track of his father due to the antagonist of his story, who is unintroduced yet, and I leave her as kind of like a plot twist villain, if you will. And all you really know is that he's on his own in this cold northern country that might or may not be a fantasy version of Ukraine. And he is kind of just trying to like stay on his feet and keep, you know, whatever like Zlatniks in his pocket he can keep and a roof over his head, and the way he's doing that is by letting himself be mistaken for a woman, and he's kind of like exchanging like sex for shelter, if only for a few nights, while moving around looking for his dad. And so the opening of the story is incredibly uncomfortable intentionally because I'm trying to talk about things in a very aggressive way. Then he like then it flashes back to his childhood, and I have reintroductions kind of for different scenes, but they're more like establishing shots because the dual timeline is when he's a child and he's growing up and he makes a childhood friend, and I have to introduce like his hometown, his like family, and a bit about the world. So the second part kind of feels like the first part, even though tonally it's not, because it betrays the tone of the entire story. And then as I continue on, both of these paths eventually converge because they both have their own climax. And I write the scenes back to back when those climaxes are happening, and they kind of inform each other because the climax of the scene when he's a child is him witnessing the death of his mother, and then the climax of his adult scene is just it's just a sexual assault scene that he then escapes from, and he then causes a giant hailstorm over the town and he like runs away, and then it cuts off and it's the end after you kind of see like how deep his trauma and self-loathing is. And then from there, in the next two parts, I'm going to grow on top of that. So if we're talking about dual POVs and stuff, the intro should still function as the intro for the entire story, but you're going to have to give establishing like sentences and paragraphs to different scenes to different characters that still move the story forward but function as introducing different scenes, places, and characters.
Yeah,
Okay.
like having read that section of the book, that the um, one thing that jumps out at me is, aside from, yes, it has, has things to say that it says in a comfortable way, doing that also establishes, it is tonally establishing, much in the way that Mary talked about, because um, you're thrust into a moment where he is having a fight or flight response to a bad situation, and that's kind of what he does a lot. He has unresolved trauma that is being compounded by the present, so that's his life at the moment, is a series of fight or flights. That's complex trauma for you.
Oh, yeah, no. Me without naming the things I'm talking about, writing about them in very, hopefully, deep seated ways that will be meaningful to people who read them. Um, and I need to write more of his story. I know I haven't got to it. I've been consumed by Garen's story, which is very different.
Yes, but I'm very curious, you know, to see what's his name? Avira.
Avira?
Avira.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Avira functions as kind of his love interest, but also he's got his own stuff going on. I have to be a little patient to get into him because his story isn't like 100% connected to Glyceus, but they're kind of intertwined.
Yeah, I do love that. That is something I love about stories that are in distinct parts, is the opportunity to, you know, reintroduce or reset, intentions. Like, you've seen the one at the beginning kind of has to carry weight for the entire story, but each one, but each subsequent introduction brings something else in. Like in the opening sequence to part three of Sheldon Saga, uh, for the first time we get a perspective that's not Sheldon's. And of course it turns out to be young Aries, and we immediately see like completely different setting. This streetwise kid in a difficult living situation who is quickly thrust into a tragedy that sets everything else in motion for that part of the book. And like, so tonally it's immediately, it's darker than the previous two parts of the book.
And having read that, then yes, I completely agree. Like it falls into this discussion of like how do you, do the multiple intros thing. The way to do it simply is you do multiple intros, but you also write them like story progression scenes. The intro to your story is it needs to function as an intro to the big story that you're telling with this. So like with Glacé's, the intro to his story functions as mostly an intro to the part one, but it also functions as an introduction to his character, his trauma, his complex emotions, which gets resolved in the end of his part three. And that's how a book should function too. The start needs to play into the end. But how you handle that is technically up to you.
All right, I think I ran out of things to say.
Yeah. I just kind of zoned out.
I think that was maybe a good.
Yeah, my brain shut off.
Fun.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to shut your brains off.
It wasn't that you shut my brain off. Just the weather shut my brain off. We haven't had sunlight here in days. It's not good. But yeah. Frost to kill. I think that the last thing that I caught was that Frost killed the flower is Glacé's story.
Yeah. Um, it is the first part of his story. I can send you a link to it. Just read it with caution.
I don't think that I'm in a place to read about things involving sexual assault, but that's
You know what? Totally fair. It's pinned in my channel and it's on my socials. So if you ever want to, it's there, but you don't feel required to do it.
oh
So
yeah, absolutely.
The section I've read, is that what the book or the series begins with?
That
Like,
first
very
story.
beginning?
Oh, I don't even know what I'm doing with the entire anthology itself, but I'm writing each character's arc as kind of their own story, so I'm just gonna do that, and then I'll see how I can place that around in terms of like making a physical book. It may wind up that I just have all three of Glacé's in a row, and then I have all three of Aviar's, then I have all three of Rebecca's, and then I go through the entire cast. Or I might split up all the part ones and then put all the part twos in separate, but we'll see what I wind up doing with that one.
Cool.
That's a long-term project, though. I'm not like fully stable on it.
All right.
But
I
yeah,
wish I did.
I think you have a pretty solid take on how to manage openings. But what is an opening if not just an establishing shot for your entire story?
That's kind of my theory on it. Yeah. The only reason why I have such strong takes on it probably is because like one, I read a lot of books. Two, I'm super annoying, but also like university level creative writing classes are really fucking hard, and your professors they don't really go easy on you. Like, if you write something that's boring, they will just like tell you to your face that it's boring. They don't
Yes.
sugarcoat things.
I only did
I-
the 101, but I got that much.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't have the stomach for college. If I go to college, I will probably just die because I can't take criticism.
But I also want to point out that like you don't need to take creative writing classes to be a great writer. You can study this stuff for free on the internet. There's so many resources. We're making one. You know what I mean? That's going to be free
Yeah.
as well. That's what this podcast is. And you can, if you have the money, you can buy university level creative writing, textbooks and read them on your own time. So you don't actually have to like shell out tons of money and go to these classes and deal with these professors like very harshly lecturing you. It was hard for me to take as well. I'm gonna be honest. They were like professors were very hard on me, but also I was like a teacher's pet. I don't know what was up with that, but like it was like the thing where they see potential in somebody, so they just kind of like beat them harder to make pearls or whatever the hell it is.
I'll be totally honest. This is unrelated to intros, but I actually really hate that style of teaching.
But
because
I have a love-hate relationship with it myself, but my point is that I've gone through it a lot, so.
yeah, I think that it's worth making the disclaimer that that doesn't work on everyone. And if you do
No,
the,
it
oh, I
doesn't.
see people in you, and that's why I'm so hard on you, at some people it will just make them give up and quit and be like, well, if I, and this might be me talking from personal experience as somebody who has just a, pardon the language, not that you guys care, you guys swear all the time, but I have a really shitty self-esteem. And I've had teachers do that thing where they're like, yeah, I'm hard on you because I think that you can do better. And I'm like, great. Well, I can't and I'll never be good enough, so I quit.
Yeah,
And that's
it's
the
sink or
learning.
swim. You're no, but you're right. Like completely, like sink or swim teaching isn't like an effective catch-all for everyone. You do got to be
No.
careful, and like you need to be able to figure out like how you as a creator, like how you function, how you learn, because if you know going into a certain setting that's how people are going to be teaching you, it's not going to be productive for you to learn from that environment in the first place.
Yeah, knowing your learning style is incredibly important.
That might be a fun thing to write a intro about. Like write a little short story about learning your learning style.
Oh, for sure.
Sure.
But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that like if I sound harsh in terms of like my points of view on writing or like giving advice, like that's kind of why. But also like I am watering down how like they talk to me too. I'm being very nice.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's not to say that you're being like, yeah, I'm gonna pull no punches.
I only pull no punches if someone specifically asks me to, and even then I still try to give reassurance because I know that like on me it was like it helped me in the end, but it wasn't like easy, and not everyone is in a place for that kind of teaching style, so like I think that ultimately if in your teaching style, and this includes this podcast, this includes our writing server, I think if you discourage somebody from pursuing the craft, then you failed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I generally hope people walk away from concrete experiences with ideas like this, like I can do something about this.
Absolutely. And like if you fuck up, whatever, like we all fuck up, but your concrete partners need to like be mindful enough of how to talk to you that they're going to give you advice in a way where it's consumable and usable for you.
Yeah. And I hope that our podcast can be a valuable resource to somebody.
Hopefully, or just fun to listen to if you want in-depth writing discussions, because that's
And
that's
that's
also
right.
part of what this is about.
How we write and what we write.
And I
And
think, hmm?
I have another question about intros.
Yeah,
Because
shoot.
when you write something that's like, say, episodic, because like this goes back into a lot of the media I consume is not books.
Yes.
Would you consider the first scene of a first episode of a TV show to be an intro to the entire series? Or would you
No.
consider each episode's intro to be its intro?
Um. Ultimately,
Would the entire
no.
first episode be an intro?
So you will sometimes see showrunners aiming, like leaning in that direction, that the first episode is either the pilot, which is structurally and tonally different from the rest of the series in order to make a point, in order to, be like we're telling you how it's going to be, or just have it have a longer intro that will then, you know, like have short title cards in follow-up episodes when people are more caught up. But it doesn't have to be either.
Yeah. It's just like,
Yeah.
what is an intro?
My
What
my take
constitutes?
My take on it is one, TV intros are so different from like writing like books, because if you're buying a book, you're buying presumably a complete story, but if you're watching a TV show that's episodic, it's gonna be like, going into it that it's incomplete. That's why they have like recaps before episodes and stuff. But generally speaking, it still follows a similar rule of the first episode is the intro to the whole series, and each episode has to kind of have a small like establishing intro of what you're getting into, but they're not like, not every episode is the pilot episode, but you do also have shows like CSI, for example. Not that I really watch it anymore, it's not my thing, but in terms of a writing discussion, CSI episodes are focused around one crime. So each one episode is like one story, but then the overall like series has a longer running story going through those episodes.
Yeah,
And they're
and
structured as such.
I will say I think that that does, that is an option in writing as well. Like, I've been writing the Sheldon Saga as as episodes, and the first one I didn't think it hadn't even occurred to me there were going to be others, but once there were, I went back and made just slight updates to the original intro, and one thing I think it does decently well is it starts out that first episode on a more uncertain and mysterious tone, and that sets up some scary shit out of the gate, and then each of the following episodes more or less begins in medias res, but the first one has like an almost pastoral quality. And with that, I think I need to duck out, unfortunately.
I think that we should call it for the night. Thank you everybody for watching. It's been fun. I love doing these. Our next one is going to be on how to write marginalized characters, and that's going to be next month. We might break it into parts too. We have to think of how we're going to structure that one. But I am stoked to edit this and piece it together, and then we have like a nice long YouTube video with all this stuff. So, thank you.
All right. Well, it's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. But yeah. Goodbye. See y'all next month.
Good night,
Have a
guys.
good night.
Well,
Good night, everyone.
farewell. Thanks for listening.
I'm also going to end stream too, just for viewers. But yes, thank you so much. All right, good night.